Welcome, fierce souls, to a story where power meets its match. Meet Dominic Blackthorne, an alpha who commands with a single glance, whose word is law across 3 territories, and whose pack would walk through fire at his command. For 10 years, he's ruled the Blackthorne pack with an iron will and unwavering strength. No one questions him. No one challenges him. Until her. Sarah Montague doesn't kneel. She doesn't submit. And when she walks into his world with fire in her eyes and defiance in her every breath, everything Dominic thought he knew about control shatters. This is a story of dominance and devotion, of an alpha who must learn that true strength isn't about ruling alone. It's about finding the one fierce enough to stand beside you. So settle in, because this alpha's about to meet his reckoning. Chapter 1. The mahogany table stretched 12 feet across the council room, its surface polished to a mirror shine that reflected the tension crackling through the air. Dominic Blackthorne sat at the head, his 6'4" frame relaxed in the leather chair, but every shifter in the room could feel the coiled power radiating from him like heat from a furnace. He didn't need to raise his voice. He never did. "Explain to me," Dominic said, his deep baritone cutting through the silence like a blade, "why the Western Border Patrol reported rogue scents for the 3rd time this month, and I'm only hearing about it now." Marcus, his beta and second-in-command, shifted uncomfortably to his right. The movement was slight, barely perceptible, but Dominic caught it. He caught everything. "Alpha, we thought. You thought." Dominic's steel-gray eyes locked onto Marcus with laser focus. "You thought you'd handle it without my knowledge. You thought a pattern of rogue activity near our most vulnerable border wasn't worth my immediate attention." It wasn't a question. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus dropped his gaze first, exposing his neck in automatic submission. "You're right, Alpha. It was a mistake. It won't happen again." Dominic held the silence for 3 more seconds. Long enough to ensure the lesson landed, but not so long as to humiliate his beta publicly. Leadership wasn't about crushing your people. It was about teaching them to be better. "Border Patrol's double starting tonight," Dominic announced, his gaze sweeping the table to include all 6 council members. "I want reports every 6 hours, not every 3 days. If a rogue so much as sneezes within a mile of our territory, I want to know about it before the echo fades." "Clear." A chorus of yes, Alpha filled the room, the voices blending in unified obedience. Dominic nodded once, then pushed back from the table with fluid grace. The meeting was over because he said it was over. That was how things worked in the Blackthorne pack. As he strode toward the door, his footsteps silent on the hardwood floor despite his size, Marcus caught up to him in the hallway. "Dom, I really am sorry. I should have." Dominic clapped a hand on his beta's shoulder, the gesture both affectionate and firm. "You should have trusted your instincts and brought it to me immediately. That's what second-in-command means, Marcus. You're not just managing pack logistics. You're my eyes and ears when I can't be everywhere at once." Marcus nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Understood. It won't happen again." "I know it won't." Dominic released him and continued down the corridor of Blackthorne Manor, the ancestral home that had housed pack alphas for 6 generations. The manor itself was a statement of power. 20,000 square feet of stone and timber nestled in the heart of Montana's wilderness, surrounded by 80,000 acres of protected pack land. Every inch of it spoke of legacy, of strength, of an unbroken line of alphas who'd held this territory against all challengers. Dominic had inherited it at 25, when his father fell in battle defending their southern border. He'd been young, untested, and facing down 3 rival alphas who thought they could carve up Blackthorne territory like a holiday feast. They'd been wrong. Now, at 35, Dominic's reputation extended far beyond Montana. Alphas from Vancouver to Denver knew the Blackthorne name, knew that Dominic's word was law, his justice swift, and his protection absolute for those under his care. He reached his office on the 2nd floor and paused before entering, gazing out the window at the sprawling forest beyond. Dusk was falling, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Somewhere out there, his pack was transitioning into evening routines. Shift changes for patrols, families gathering for dinner, pups being called in from play. All of it under his watch. All of it his responsibility. The weight should have felt crushing. Instead, it felt right. This was what he was born for. Dominic pushed open his office door and stopped dead. Someone was sitting in his chair. Not just someone, a woman. She had her boots propped up on his desk, ankles crossed, as she examined what appeared to be a file from his cabinet. Her honey-blonde hair was pulled back in a high ponytail, revealing a face with sharp cheekbones, full lips, and eyes the color of aged whiskey. Those eyes lifted to meet his, and Dominic felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Surprise. "You're late," she said, her voice carrying a husky warmth that somehow made the criticism sound like an observation rather than a complaint. "I've been waiting 20 minutes. Dominic's wolf stirred beneath his skin, rising to attention with interest that bordered on fascination. Who was this woman who dared to sit in his chair, in his office, in his house, as if she owned the place? "You're in my seat," he said calmly, closing the door behind him with deliberate care. "Am I?" She glanced down at the chair, as if noticing for the first time, then shrugged. "Huh, so I am." She made no move to vacate it. Dominic crossed the room in 4 long strides, moving with the predatory grace that made weaker shifters step aside without conscious thought. He planted both hands on the desk and leaned forward, bringing his face level with hers. At this distance, he could see the gold flecks in her amber eyes, could catch her scent. Wildflowers and something sharper, like ozone before a storm. Human, his wolf told him, but there was something else there, something that made his instincts perk up with interest. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice dropping into that lower register that made pack members stumble over their words. She didn't stumble. She smiled. "Sarah Montague. I'm your new pack historian and archivist." She swung her legs off his desk and stood in one fluid motion, forcing Dominic to straighten or risk their faces being inches apart. He straightened, but slowly, maintaining eye contact. "I didn't hire a historian. No, the Shifter Council did. They're very concerned about your pack's record-keeping practices. Apparently, you've been lax about documenting territorial agreements, interpack alliances, and genealogical records." She said it like she was reading from a report, which Dominic realized she probably was. His jaw tightened. The Shifter Council, the governing body that oversaw all North American packs, had been pushing for modernization and transparency for years. Dominic had pushed back, preferring to run his pack the way it had always been run. Apparently, they decided to push harder. "The council doesn't have authority to place someone in my pack without my consent," he said, his tone hardening. "Actually, according to Article 7 of the Continental Pack Accord, they do. When a pack's historical records are deemed insufficient for interpack legal proceedings." She tilted her head, studying him with open curiosity. "You really should read the agreements you sign, Alpha Blackthorn." Something hot and electric crackled in the space between them. Dominic's wolf was fully alert now, focused on this woman with an intensity that should have concerned him. No one spoke to him like this. No one challenged him in his own territory, in his own office. "Miss Montague." "Ms.," she corrected. "Ms. Montague," he continued, his voice soft with warning. "I don't care what the council thinks they've authorized. This is my pack, my territory, my rules, and I don't recall inviting you into either." She held his gaze without flinching, and Dominic felt a grudging respect spark alongside his irritation. Courage or foolishness, he hadn't decided which yet. "Then I suppose you'd better call the council and explain why you're refusing their directly appointed representative." She pulled a phone from her pocket and held it out to him. "Go ahead. I'll wait." The challenge in her eyes was unmistakable. Dominic could call. He could refuse her appointment. He could have her escorted off pack lands within the hour. But that would mean a confrontation with the council, which would mean weeks of political maneuvering and negotiations, which would distract him from the rogue situation at his borders, which was his actual problem. This woman, infuriating as she was, wasn't a threat. She was an annoyance, a bureaucratic obstacle placed in his path by politicians who didn't understand how real packs operated. He could deal with annoyances. "How long?" he asked. Her eyebrows rose. "I'm sorry. How long will this historical documentation project take?" 3 months. Maybe 4, depending on the state of your archives. She lowered the phone, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I'll try not to disrupt your brooding alpha routine too much." Dominic felt his own lips twitch despite his irritation. Brave and sharp-tongued. Interesting combination. "You'll report your activities to Marcus, my beta. You'll respect pack hierarchy and protocol. And you'll stay out of my way." He moved around the desk, reclaiming his territory. "Those are non-negotiable." "Of course, Alpha." She said it with just enough emphasis to make it sound like mockery. Dominic settled into his chair, still warm from her presence, and fixed her with a level stare. The archives are in the East Wing, 3rd floor. Marcus will show you. You start tomorrow at dawn. Dawn. For the first time, she looked slightly less composed. That's early. Welcome to pack life, Ms. Montague. We don't run on human hours here. He picked up a file from his desk, opening it with deliberate dismissal. You're excused. He sensed rather than saw her hesitation, felt the moment she decided whether to push back or retreat. She retreated, but on her terms. Until tomorrow, then, Alpha. The title was definitely mockery this time. Dominic listened to her footsteps retreat down the hallway, measured and unhurried. Only when the sound faded completely did he set down the file and lean back in his chair. His wolf was still alert, still focused on the lingering scent of wildflowers and ozone. Dominic frowned. He didn't have time for distractions, especially not intriguing, sharp-tongued human women who looked at him like he was an interesting puzzle rather than an alpha to be feared and respected. 3 months. Maybe 4. He could handle that. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, East Border. You need to see this. Now. Dominic was out of his chair and moving before the message finished loading. Whatever complications Sarah Montague might bring, they paled in comparison to potential threats to his pack. That was his priority. That was always his priority. Everything else, including whiskey-colored eyes and defiant smiles, would have to wait. Chapter 2. The eastern border fence line ran for 3 miles through dense pine forest, marking the boundary between Blackthorn territory and the unclaimed wilderness beyond. Dominic's boots crunched through the underbrush as he approached the cluster of pack members gathered near a massive Douglas fir. Marcus stood at the center, his expression grim in the beam of his flashlight. He looked up as Dominic approached, relief and concern warring on his face. Alpha. He stepped aside, revealing what had gathered the group. 3 deer carcasses lay in a neat row at the base of the tree. They'd been killed cleanly, throats torn out with surgical precision. But that wasn't what made Dominic's wolf rise snarling to the surface. Each deer had been marked, a symbol carved into the hide, still seeping blood that was too fresh to have been there long. Dominic crouched beside the nearest carcass, his jaw tight. He knew that symbol. Every alpha in the Northern Territories knew it. The Blood Moon Pack. How long ago? His voice was barely above a whisper, but every shifter present heard it clearly. Less than 2 hours, Marcus said. 3rd shift patrol found them at dusk. Dominic stood slowly, his mind racing through implications and strategies. The Blood Moon Pack operated out of the Dakotas, nearly 400 miles east. Their alpha, Victor Strand, was old-school, brutal, territorial, and about as subtle as a sledgehammer. They had no border disputes with Blackthorn, no outstanding conflicts, no reason to be leaving marked kills on Dominic's land. Unless they were sending a message. Sent trails? Dominic asked. 3 distinct tracks, all male. They didn't try to hide their presence. Marcus gestured toward the tree line. Headed northeast after they left the kills. We tracked them for a mile before they crossed into neutral territory. Deliberately provocative. Coming onto Blackthorn land, killing game, marking it with their pack symbol, then retreating without covering their tracks. This wasn't a challenge, not yet. This was a test. Victor was probing, seeing how Dominic would respond. Double the patrols on the eastern border. I want 6-person teams, rotating every 4 hours. Dominic straightened, his alpha presence rolling out across the gathered pack members like a physical force. No one engages Blood Moon wolves without my direct order. If they're spotted, track and report. Clear. Yes, Alpha. The response was immediate and unified. Dominic turned to Marcus. Get me everything we have on Victor Strand's movements over the last 6 months. Trading partners, territorial expansions, pack challenges. Anything that might explain why he's suddenly interested in my borders. Already on it. I'll have a full report by morning. Make it 2 hours. Dominic's gaze swept the forest, his enhanced vision picking out every shadow, every movement. And send word to our alliance packs. If Blood Moon is making moves, they need to know. The pack members dispersed with practiced efficiency, melting into the forest to carry out their alpha's commands. Within minutes, only Dominic and Marcus remained. What are you thinking? Marcus asked quietly. Dominic studied the marked carcasses, his wolf growling low in his chest. I'm thinking Victor Strand doesn't do anything without a reason. And I'm thinking that reason is going to cause me problems. Should we reach out? Open a dialogue? No. Dominic's tone was flat, final. He made the first move. Let him wonder how I'll respond. Fear and uncertainty are more useful than showing our hand too early. Marcus nodded slowly. The council's not going to like this. They've been pushing for peaceful resolutions and diplomatic channels. Dominic's expression hardened. The council doesn't have to defend these borders. I do. And I'll handle Victor Strand my way. They walked back through the forest in silence, the weight of potential conflict settling over them like a shroud. Dominic's mind was already 10 steps ahead, planning patrol routes, calculating response times, identifying weak points in their defenses. This was what being alpha meant. Constant vigilance. Endless responsibility. The knowledge that every decision could mean life or death for those under your protection. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was everything. By the time they emerged from the tree line near the manor, dawn was still hours away, but lights blazed from several windows. The pack house never truly slept. There was always someone on duty, always activity, always life. Get some rest, Dominic told Marcus. I need you sharp tomorrow. You should take your own advice. Marcus's tone was careful, the privilege of a beta who'd known his alpha since childhood. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Dominic couldn't remember. I'll sleep when my borders are secure. Dom. Good night, Marcus. The beta sighed but didn't push further. Good night, Alpha. Dominic watched him disappear into the manor, then turned toward the gardens that wrapped around the southern wing. He needed to think, to process, to let his wolf run through possibilities and strategies without the weight of pack eyes watching his every move. The gardens were his mother's legacy. 3 acres of carefully cultivated wildness that somehow looked both manicured and untamed. Stone paths wound between flowering bushes and native plants, all designed to bloom in succession, so that color painted the landscape from early spring through late fall. His mother had died when he was 12, but he still remembered her here, dirt under her fingernails and joy in her eyes as she explained the difference between aggressive cultivation and gentle encouragement. You can't force nature to bend to your will, she told him, her hand steady as she planted a struggling rosebush. You can only create the conditions where it wants to thrive. His father had scoffed at the philosophy, claiming it made her weak. Dominic had learned differently. His mother had been the strongest person he'd ever known, right up until the cancer took her. He rounded a corner in the path and stopped short. Sarah Montague sat on a stone bench near a fountain, bathed in moonlight and surrounded by night-blooming jasmine. She'd changed from her earlier jeans and sweater into fitted black leggings and an oversized shirt that slipped off one shoulder, revealing smooth skin and the curve of her collarbone. She was sketching something in a leather-bound journal, her expression focused and peaceful in a way it hadn't been during their confrontation in his office. Dominic should have turned around, should have left her to her solitude and maintained the distance he'd established. Instead, he found himself walking closer. She looked up when he was 5 feet away, no surprise in her expression, as if she'd known he was there all along. Couldn't sleep? She asked, setting her pencil down. I don't sleep much. He gestured to the bench. May I? Her lips quirked. It's your garden. But you were here first. He didn't know why that distinction mattered, only that it did. She shifted, making room. Then yes, you may. Dominic sat, maintaining a careful foot of distance between them. This close, her scent was stronger. Wildflowers and ozone, and something uniquely her that made his wolf pace restlessly beneath his skin. What are you drawing? He asked, nodding toward her journal. She turned it so he could see. The sketch was of the fountain, not a photographic reproduction, but something more impressionistic, capturing the play of moonlight on water and stone with confident flowing lines. You're talented, he said, meaning it. Thank you. She studied her work critically. I find it helps me think. Process. When you spend all day buried in dusty archives, your brain needs a different kind of engagement. Is that why you became a historian? Love of dusty archives. She laughed, the sound warm and unguarded. Not exactly. I became a historian because I love stories. And archives are just stories waiting to be discovered. The real, messy, complicated truth behind the legends and myths. Dominic leaned back, his arms stretched along the top of the bench. Not touching her, but close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her skin. And what truth do you expect to find in Blackthorn archives? I don't expect anything. That's the point. She turned to face him, tucking one leg under her. Every pack has its official history, the version they tell themselves and outsiders. But the real story is always more complex, more human, or shifter in this case. We prefer to keep our stories private. I know. That's why the council had to force the issue. Her tone was matter of fact, not apologetic. But documentation isn't about airing dirty laundry. It's about preservation, protection, making sure that when disputes arise, and they always do, there's a factual record to reference instead of just competing memories and grudges. Dominic considered her words, seeing the logic even as his instincts bristled against the intrusion. You speak from experience. I've worked with 7 packs over the last 5 years. I've seen alliances crumble because no one could prove who promised what 50 years ago. I've seen families torn apart because genealogical records were incomplete and inheritance was contested. She met his eyes steadily. Good records aren't about control. They're about justice. There was passion in her voice, conviction born from something deeper than professional interest. Dominic found himself curious despite his earlier irritation. Why this work? He asked. You're human. You could have stayed in the human world, never dealt with pack politics or territorial disputes or alphas who don't want you here. Could have. She smiled, but there was something bittersweet in it. But that wouldn't have been living. Not really. Before Dominic could pursue that cryptic response, his phone buzzed. Marcus, with an update on the Blood Moon situation. Duty calling, as it always did. He stood, and Sarah looked up at him with those whiskey-colored eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Border troubles? She asked quietly. Dominic's expression shuddered. Nothing that concerns you. Everything that threatens this pack concerns me now. That's what being pack historian means. She stood as well, closing her journal. But I understand. We just met. Trust takes time. She brushed past him, her shoulder grazing his arm, and Dominic felt that electric crackle again. Awareness that shot straight through his carefully maintained control. Ms. Montague, he called as she reached the garden gate. She turned, moonlight catching in her hair. Dawn means 5 a.m., don't be late. Her smile was pure challenge. Wouldn't dream of it, Alpha. Then she was gone, leaving only the scent of wildflowers and the unsettling feeling that Dominic's carefully ordered world had just tilted on its axis. His wolf wanted to follow her, wanted to chase that scent, learn every secret behind those knowing eyes. Dominic forced himself to walk in the opposite direction, back toward the manor and the responsibilities waiting there. He didn't have time for distractions, no matter how intriguing they were. Chapter 3. Sarah was waiting outside the archive room at exactly 4:58 a.m., 2 cups of coffee in hand and a messenger bag slung over her shoulder. She looked entirely too alert for someone who'd been up past midnight sketching in the garden. Dominic, who'd been running on 3 hours of sleep and pure alpha stubbornness, felt his irritation spike. You're early, he said, unlocking the heavy oak door. I prefer to think of it as punctual with a safety margin. She held out one of the cups. Peace offering. Black, 2 sugars. Marcus told me that's how you take it. Dominic accepted the coffee, surprised by the gesture. You've been interrogating my beta about my preferences? I've been making friendly conversation with the person assigned to help me navigate pack dynamics. There's a difference. She followed him into the archive room, her eyes widening as she took in the space. The East Wing archive was exactly as neglected as the council had suspected. Shelves lined 3 walls, floor to ceiling, crammed with leather-bound ledgers, loose papers, boxes of photographs, and what appeared to be several decades of filing done by people who didn't believe in alphabetical order. Dust motes danced in the morning light, filtering through high windows. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and abandonment. Oh, Sarah breathed, setting down her bag. Oh, this is going to take longer than 4 months. Dominic leaned against a shelf, sipping his coffee and watching her transform. The challenging woman from last night disappeared, replaced by something almost reverent as she ran her fingers along the spines of ancient ledgers. This one's from 1847, she murmured, carefully extracting a volume. Your pack is older than I thought. 6 generations, Dominic confirmed. We've held this territory since before Montana was a state. And you've kept records the entire time? More or less. My great-great-grandfather was meticulous. His son less so. By the time my father inherited, record-keeping was seen as, he searched for the right word, unnecessary. Sarah supplied. Optional. She set the ledger on the single table in the room's center, handling it with the care most people reserved for newborns. Well, the council's going to have a field day with this. In a good way, though. These early records could be invaluable for establishing territorial precedents across the Northern Territories. Dominic watched her work, fascinated despite himself. She'd pulled her hair back into a practical braid, revealing the elegant line of her neck. Her hands moved with confident precision as she assessed the collection, sorting volumes into preliminary categories with a system he couldn't quite follow. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "I'm observing. Is that what we're calling it?" She glanced at him, amusement dancing in her amber eyes. "Don't you have alpha things to do? Border patrols to command? Subordinates to intimidate? I'm delegating." He pushed off the shelf. "And making sure you understand the boundaries of your access." "Boundaries?" She straightened, brushing dust from her hands. "Let me guess. I can look at the boring administrative records, but anything involving pack security, personal information, or potentially embarrassing family secrets is off limits." "Essentially. Then we're going to have a problem." She crossed her arms, her posture shifting from historian to adversary in a heartbeat. "Because I can't create an accurate historical record with selective access. Either you trust me to do this job properly, or you don't. But I won't waste 4 months producing a sanitized version of history that serves no one." Dominic felt his wolf stir, responding to her challenge with equal parts annoyance and appreciation. This isn't about trust. It's about security. Pack safety supersedes historical accuracy. "Does it?" She moved closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes, count the freckles across her nose. "Because from where I'm standing, your pack's safety might depend on those accurate records. What if the Blood Moon Pack disputes your eastern border claim? What if another pack challenges your alliance agreements? Without documentation, you're fighting with one hand tied behind your back." Dominic's entire body went still. "How do you know about Blood Moon?" "I don't live under a rock, Alpha. I smelled the tension on everyone this morning. Saw the extra patrol units heading east. And before you ask, no one told me anything. I'm just not blind." She held his stare without flinching. "Plus, basic research showed that Blood Moon territory edges your eastern border. Doesn't take a genius to connect the dots." Pride warred with caution in Dominic's chest. She was smart, dangerously so, and observant in ways that could be either an asset or a liability. "What I do about Blood Moon is none of your concern. But what you've done historically with Blood Moon absolutely is." She turned back to the shelves, running her finger along the spines. "Somewhere in here, there should be records of previous territorial agreements, correspondence between alphas, maybe even records of conflicts and their resolutions. That's the kind of documentation that could mean the difference between war and peace." Dominic's jaw tightened. She wasn't wrong, which made her even more frustrating. "Fine," he bit out. "You'll have full access to territorial and alliance records. But personal pack information, births, deaths, matings, family disputes, that stays private unless I specifically approve it." "Fair enough." She pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "I'll need a list of what you consider sensitive, along with a prioritization of what you want documented first. If territorial information is time-sensitive because of the Blood Moon situation, we should start there." Dominic blinked. She just backed him into exactly the arrangement she wanted while making him think it was his decision. Clever. Too clever. His phone buzzed before he could respond. Marcus again, this time with a call rather than a text. "I need to take this," Dominic said, already moving toward the door. "Of course. Go be Alpha Y." Sarah waved him off, already absorbed in a ledger from the 1890s. Dominic stepped into the hallway and answered. "What?" "Good morning to you too," Marcus said dryly. "We've got a situation with the Richardson family. Their youngest shifted for the first time last night, and it didn't go well. The father's requesting your presence." Dominic pinched the bridge of his nose. First shifts were always complicated, painful, terrifying, and occasionally destructive. But they required an alpha's presence to help guide the new shifter through the chaos. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "There's more." Marcus's tone shifted, became more serious. "I got word from one of our alliance packs up north. Blood Moon's been sniffing around their borders too. Victor's making moves across multiple territories." Ice slid down Dominic's spine. Multiple territories meant this wasn't about Blackthorn specifically. Victor was planning something larger, something coordinated. "Call an emergency council meeting for tonight. 8 p.m., full attendance mandatory." Dominic's mind raced through implications. And reach out to every pack in our alliance network. I want to know who else Blood Moon has contacted in the last month. On it. What about the historian? Dominic glanced back at the archive room, where Sarah was carefully photographing pages of the ledger with professional equipment he hadn't noticed her bringing in. Give her whatever she needs for the territorial records. But Marcus, keep an eye on her. You think she's a threat? I think she's too observant for her own good. And I don't like coincidences. Dominic started down the hallway. The council sends her here just as Blood Moon starts making moves? That timing bothers me. You think the council's involved? I think I don't know enough yet to rule anything out. He ended the call and headed for the Richardson family home on the southern edge of Pack Lands. But even as he focused on the immediate crisis, part of his mind stayed in that dusty archive room with a woman who challenged him at every turn and seemed to see straight through his carefully constructed walls. 3 months. Maybe 4. It was starting to feel like a very long time. The Richardson house was chaos when Dominic arrived. Furniture lay overturned in the living room. Deep claw marks gouged the hardwood floors. And in the center of it all, a 15-year-old boy crouched in a defensive posture, his eyes wild and his body caught between human and wolf. The painful in-between state that every new shifter struggled to control. Alpha, Thomas Richardson, the boy's father, looked haggard with exhaustion and worry. Thank God you're here. He's been like this for 3 hours. We can't get through to him. Dominic assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. The boy, Kyle, wasn't feral, just terrified and overwhelmed by the sudden emergence of his wolf. His first shift had likely been triggered by puberty and strong emotion, hitting him without warning or preparation. Everyone out, Dominic commanded quietly. Now, the family didn't hesitate, clearing the room in seconds. Only Dominic remained, facing down the snarling, frightened teenager. Kyle. Dominic's voice dropped into that alpha register that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the wolf. Look at me. The boy's eyes snapped to his, gold warring with brown as human and wolf fought for dominance. Good. Now breathe. Slow and steady. Let your wolf know you're not fighting him. You're learning to work together. Kyle's breathing was ragged, panicked, but he tried to follow Dominic's instruction. That's it. Your wolf isn't your enemy. He's part of you. Always has been, since the day you were born. He's just awake now. Aware. Dominic moved closer, each step measured and calm. And he's scared. Can you feel it? That's not aggression you're feeling. It's fear. He doesn't know what's happening any more than you do. Understanding flickered in Kyle's eyes. His breathing slowed fractionally. The first shift is the hardest because neither of you knows how to share space yet. But you will. I promise. Dominic crouched, bringing himself to Kyle's level. Now, I'm going to push a little bit of my alpha presence at you. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but it will help your wolf settle. Trust me. He didn't wait for agreement. Dominic let his power roll out. Not crushing or dominant, but firm and grounding. A reminder that Kyle wasn't alone, wasn't lost, wasn't facing this without guidance. Kyle whimpered, then slowly, painfully, began to shift back to human form. It took 10 minutes of Dominic's steady presence and quiet encouragement. But finally, a fully human teenage boy collapsed onto the scarred floor, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Dominic pulled off his jacket and draped it over Kyle's shoulders. You did good, kid. Better than most on their first shift. It hurt, Kyle gasped. Everything hurt. I know. It gets easier. By your 10th shift, you'll barely notice the transition. Dominic helped him to a sitting position. But Kyle, this is important. You can't shift around humans. Ever. And you need to learn to control your triggers. Strong emotions, physical pain, fear. All of those can cause involuntary shifts until you master control. Kyle nodded, still trembling. Your father will work with you on the basics, and will set up training sessions with the pack's shift instructor. Dominic squeezed his shoulder. But you're packed now. Fully. And that means you're under my protection. Always. The boy's eyes welled with fresh tears, but these were different, gratitude and relief and belonging. Dominic called the family back in, spending another hour going over protocols and expectations. By the time he left, Kyle was asleep upstairs, and the Richardsons were planning their son's official welcome ceremony into the adult pack. It was nearly noon when Dominic finally returned to the manor. He was exhausted, covered in sweat and dust, and desperately in need of a shower. Naturally, he ran into Sarah in the main hallway. She took one look at him and raised an eyebrow. Rough morning. You could say that. He kept walking, too tired to engage. She fell into step beside him, surprisingly. First shift. He stopped, turning to face her. How did you? I told you, I've worked with 7 packs. I recognize the signs. Her expression softened slightly. Is the kid okay? He will be. Dominic studied her, trying to reconcile the challenging woman from this morning with the one showing genuine concern now. Why do you care? Because first shifts are traumatic. Because that kid is terrified and needs support. Because I'm not actually a heartless bureaucrat despite what you seem to think. She shrugged. Also, I found something in the archives you should see. That got his attention. What? Correspondence between your great-great-grandfather and Victor Strand's great-great-grandfather. From 1923. She pulled out her phone, showing him photographs of yellowed letters. They had a territorial dispute too. Nearly went to war over it. Dominic took the phone, reading quickly. The situation was eerily similar. Blood Moon probing Blackthorn borders, testing responses, building toward confrontation. How did they resolve it? He asked. That's the interesting part. They didn't fight. They negotiated a shared hunting territory as a buffer zone. According to these letters, it kept the peace for 3 decades. She met his eyes, until someone decided to ignore the agreement and claim the buffer zone outright. Who? Your great-grandfather. And that decision led to a 3-year conflict that nearly destroyed both packs. Dominic handed back her phone, his mind racing. Why didn't I know about this? Because it's not in the official pack history. Your great-grandfather apparently decided that particular failure wasn't worth recording for posterity. Sarah's tone was gentle but firm. That's why accurate records matter, Alpha. So you don't repeat the mistakes of those who came before you. She left him standing in the hallway, staring after her with a mixture of frustration, respect, and something he refused to name. The woman was going to be trouble. The question was, what kind? Chapter 4. The council meeting that evening was tense from the moment Dominic called it to order. 6 pack council members sat around the table. Marcus, head of pack security. Elena, lead healer. Thomas, who managed pack finances and businesses. Sarah, who coordinated family and social welfare. James, who handled human relations. And Catherine, the elder representative who'd served under Dominic's father. All of them looked worried. Let's start with what we know, Dominic said, standing at the head of the table with his hands braced against the polished wood. Blood Moon Pack has been making incursions onto our eastern border, as well as territories held by at least 3 of our alliance packs. The timing is coordinated, the message clear. Victor Strand is testing our defenses. Testing or declaring intent? Catherine asked, her weathered face grave. In my experience, Victor doesn't test. He announces. Which is why this concerns me. Dominic straightened. He's being strategic. Careful. That's not Victor's usual style. Marcus pulled up a digital map on the screen at the far end of the room, showing Blood Moon territory highlighted in red and Blackthorn in blue, with several smaller allied packs in green. If you look at the pattern of incursions, Marcus said, using a laser pointer, they're not random. He's probing the weakest points in our alliance network. Small packs with limited resources, border territories that are hard to patrol, areas where territorial claims overlap. He's looking for cracks, Elena observed. Places where he can drive a wedge between us and our allies. Or he's planning a coordinated assault. Thomas's voice was grim. Hit multiple territories simultaneously, force us to split our resources. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated that possibility. We need to reach out to the council, Sarah said finally. Get them involved before this escalates. No. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. The council will bog us down in diplomatic procedure while Victor continues making moves. We handle this ourselves. Dom, Marcus began. We shore up our alliance network. I want face-to-face meetings with every allied alpha within the week. We coordinate patrols, share intelligence, present a united front. Dominic's gaze swept the table. Victor wants to find weakness? We show him strength. And if he attacks anyway? Catherine asked quietly. Then we fight. On our terms, with our allies at our backs. Dominic's expression hardened. But I won't let fear of conflict paralyze us into inaction. That's exactly what he wants. The discussion continued for another hour, hashing out logistics and strategies. By the time Dominic dismissed the council, night had fully fallen, and his head was pounding with exhaustion. He found himself walking back to the archives, drawn by instinct he didn't fully understand. Sarah was still there, surrounded by open ledgers and making notes on her laptop. She'd changed into a casual dress that somehow managed to look both comfortable and distracting, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up when he entered, no surprise in her expression. Couldn't stay away? I came to see what else you've found. It was partly true. Liar. But she smiled as she said it. You came because you're stressed and the gardens are too cold this time of night, and you don't want to be alone with your thoughts. Dominic froze. You don't know anything about me. Don't I? She closed her laptop, giving him her full attention. You're carrying the weight of hundreds of lives on your shoulders. You make decisions that could mean life or death for your pack. And you do it all alone because that's what being alpha means. Never showing weakness, never sharing the burden, never admitting that you're human. Or shifter. Whatever. Her words cut too close to truths he'd never spoken aloud. You think you've figured me out after 2 days? His voice came out harsher than intended. No, but I've figured out that you're drowning and too proud to ask for a life preserver. She stood, moving around the table toward him. I've seen it before, Dominic. Alphas who carry everything until they break. I won't break. Everyone breaks eventually. The question is whether you'll have anyone standing beside you when you do. She stopped an arm's length away, close enough that her scent wrapped around him. That's what packs are supposed to be, right? Not just people who follow orders, but people who share the burden. You're not pack. No, I'm an annoying human historian who asks too many questions and doesn't know when to mind her own business. Her lips quirked. But I'm also someone who's spent the last 10 hours reading about your family's history, about the choices they made, the battles they fought, the mistakes they died regretting. And do you know what the common thread is? Dominic couldn't answer. Every Blackthorn alpha who fell, who truly failed their pack, did it because they stopped listening, because they convinced themselves that leadership meant having all the answers, making all the decisions, bearing all the weight alone. She reached out, her fingers ghosting over his forearm. Don't make that mistake. The touch sent electricity racing through Dominic's nervous system. His wolf surged forward, demanding he close the distance between them, pull her against him, claim. He stepped back, breaking the contact. You're crossing a line, Ms. Montague. Sarah. Her amber eyes held his steadily. And maybe someone needs to. Maybe that's why the council really sent me here. Not just to document your history, but to remind you that you don't have to face everything alone. The council doesn't care about my emotional well-being. No, but they care about pack stability. And an alpha on the edge of burnout threatens that stability. She turned back to her work, the moment broken. I found something else you should see. Treaty negotiations from 1967 between Blackthorn and Blood Moon. They established formal borders and a mutual defense pact. Dominic moved to the table, grateful for the shift to safer ground. A defense pact? Against rogue packs from the west. Apparently, there was a major incursion that threatened both territories. She pulled up scanned documents on her laptop. The pact held for 15 years before it was dissolved, quietly, with no formal announcement or legal documentation of its end. Why? That's what I can't figure out. The records just stop. No explanation, no conflict noted, no formal dissolution. It's like both packs decided to pretend the agreement never existed. Dominic studied the documents, his strategic mind already working through implications. If the pact was never formally dissolved, then technically, it might still be legally binding under shifter law. Sarah met his eyes. Which means Victor's current actions could be in violation of his own pack's treaty obligations. That's leverage. That's ammunition for the council if they do get involved. But more importantly, she pulled up another document. It's proof that Blackthorn and Blood Moon have a history of cooperation when faced with common threats. Maybe that's the angle you need. Dominic leaned back, impressed despite himself. You found all this in one day? I'm good at my job. No false modesty, just fact. And your archives are actually better organized than you think, once you understand the system. Your great-great-grandfather was meticulous. Everything's here. You just have to know where to look. What else have you found? They spent the next 2 hours going through her discoveries. Birth records that established clear pack lineage. Trade agreements that showed Blackthorn's economic influence across the northern territories. Detailed accounts of conflicts and their resolutions, some diplomatic, some violent, all carefully documented. It was a treasure trove of information that Dominic hadn't known existed in his own home. "This changes things," he said finally, sitting back in his chair. "These records could strengthen our position significantly, both with Victor and with the council. I told you documentation matters." Sarah stretched, her back arching in a way that made Dominic's mouth go dry. "But Dominic, there's something else." Her tone shifted, became more careful. "What?" "I found references to something called the Luna Protocol in several of the older ledgers. But there's no explanation of what it actually is, and the references stop completely around 1985. She pulled up her notes. "Do you know what that means?" Dominic went very still. "Where did you see those references?" "Council meeting minutes from the 1970s and early 80s. It seemed important, debated at length. Multiple alphas weighing in. But then nothing." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Dominic's jaw tightened. The Luna Protocol. He'd heard whispers of it growing up. Fragments of conversation his father would shut down immediately. It was pack business. Private business. The kind of thing that didn't get shared with outsiders. Even outsiders with whiskey-colored eyes and too much perception. "It's not relevant to your work here," he said flatly. Sarah's expression shifted, something wounded flickering across her face before she masked it. "Everything in these archives is relevant to my work. That's the point. Not this." Dominic stood, putting distance between them. "Some things stay private, Sarah. That was the agreement. The agreement was that personal pack information required your approval. This appears to be policy-related, which falls under my decision." His alpha voice leaked through, making the words a command rather than a statement. "And my decision is that the Luna Protocol is off-limits." She flinched slightly at the power in his tone, and Dominic immediately regretted it. But he couldn't take it back without showing weakness, without explaining things he had no intention of explaining. "Fine." Her voice was cool now, professional. "I'll note it in my report as restricted information. The council will want to know why, but that's your problem, not mine." "Sarah, it's late. I should get back to my quarters." She closed her laptop with more force than necessary, gathering her materials. "Thank you for the additional context on the territorial agreements. I'll have a full summary ready by tomorrow afternoon." She was angry, not just professionally frustrated, but personally hurt. And Dominic found he cared about that distinction more than he should. "Wait." He caught her arm as she moved past him, gently enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. "The Luna Protocol isn't what you think," he said quietly. "It's not some policy loophole or legal maneuver. It's personal, painful, and it's not my story alone to tell." Some of the ice melted from her expression. "Then tell me whose story it is. Let me talk to them, document it properly so it doesn't get lost to history. It involves my mother." The words came out harder than Dominic intended. "And she's been dead for 23 years. So no, you can't interview her." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, followed by something that looked like genuine compassion. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. How could you? We keep our grief as private as everything else." He released her arm, suddenly uncomfortable with the vulnerability of the moment. "The Luna Protocol died with her. That's all you need to know. Except it didn't die, did it? Or you wouldn't react like this every time I mention it." Sarah's voice was gentle now, careful. "Dominic, I'm not trying to exploit your mother's memory. But if there's something in that protocol that could help your pack, help you, then doesn't it deserve to be understood? What it deserves is to be left alone." Dominic turned away, staring out the window at the darkness beyond. Some history isn't meant to be preserved. Some things are better forgotten. He heard her soft footsteps crossing the room, felt her presence beside him even though she didn't touch him. "I've been doing this work for 5 years, she said quietly. "And I've learned that the stories we try hardest to forget are usually the ones we need most to remember. The painful ones. The complicated ones. The ones that don't fit the narrative we want to tell about ourselves." Very philosophical. "Still not changing my mind. I'm not trying to change your mind tonight." She paused. "But Dominic, eventually, you're going to have to decide whether protecting the past is worth sacrificing the future." She left before he could respond, her footsteps echoing down the hallway until they faded into silence. Dominic stood alone in the archive room, surrounded by centuries of his family's history, and wondered why it felt like Sarah had just walked away with something essential he hadn't meant to give her. His wolf was restless, agitated by her departure, wanting to follow, wanting to chase. wanting her. It was a distraction he couldn't afford. Not with Victor making moves on his borders. Not with his pack's safety hanging in the balance. Not with the weight of leadership pressing down on his shoulders like a physical force. But as Dominic finally left the archives and walked through the quiet manor, he couldn't shake the memory of her hand on his arm, her scent in his lungs, her words cutting through his defenses with surgical precision. You don't have to face everything alone. Except he did. That was what being alpha meant, wasn't it? The Eastern Border Patrol found the second set of marked kills 3 nights later. This time, it wasn't just deer. Blood Moon wolves had slaughtered an entire elk herd, 12 animals, and arranged them in a deliberate pattern. A warning, a threat, a declaration of intent. Dominic stood in the clearing at 2 a.m., his breath misting in the cold mountain air, and felt his wolf snarl with rage beneath his skin. "They're escalating," Marcus said from beside him. "This isn't probing anymore. This is provocation. They want me to respond." Dominic's voice was deadly calm. "They want me angry, impulsive, making mistakes. Are you going to give them what they want?" Dominic studied the carnage, his mind working through scenarios and outcomes. If he retaliated, he'd be playing Victor's game. If he didn't respond, he'd look weak, and weakness invited further aggression. There was no good choice. Only calculated risks. Call the Allied Alphas. Emergency summit here tomorrow night. Dominic turned away from the kills. If Victor wants a war, he'll get one. But he'll be fighting all of us, not just Blackthorn. The Council can hear about it after the fact. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. We're done waiting for bureaucrats to give us permission to defend our own territory. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his phone to make the calls. Dominic walked back through the forest alone, his wolf pushing at his control, demanding violence, demanding blood, demanding he prove his dominance the old way. Tooth and claw and fury. But that wasn't how you won wars. Not anymore. Strategy. Alliances. Overwhelming force applied with precision. That was how you protected your pack. He was so focused on his thoughts that he almost didn't notice Sarah sitting on the manor's back steps, wrapped in a blanket and nursing a cup of tea. She looked up as he approached, no surprise in her expression. "Couldn't sleep either? What are you doing out here?" he asked instead of answering. "Thinking. Processing. The usual insomnia routine." She studied him in the moonlight. "You found something bad. I can see it in how you're holding yourself." Dominic should have deflected, maintained the distance he'd been carefully rebuilding over the last 3 days. Instead, he found himself sitting down beside her on the cold stone steps. Blood Moon escalated. Marked kills on our territory, deliberately provocative. "What are you going to do?" "What I have to." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "Call in my allies. Make a show of force. Hope Victor decides the cost of war isn't worth whatever he's after. And if he doesn't, then a lot of people are going to die, and I'll have to live with every single death." The words came out more raw than he intended. That's what leadership means. Making choices that get people killed and somehow living with yourself afterward. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She shifted closer, her shoulder pressing against his, sharing warmth and silent support. "My father was a Marine," she said softly. "He used to say that the weight of command never gets lighter. You just get stronger at carrying it." Dominic caught the past tense. "Killed in action when I was 16. Afghanistan." Her voice was steady, but he heard the old grief underneath. "My mother died when I was 8. Cancer. So I understand something about losing people you love. About carrying weight that never goes away." Dominic looked at her. Really looked, and saw past the challenging historian to the woman beneath. Someone who'd known loss. Who understood responsibility and sacrifice in ways most humans never did. "Is that why you work with shifter packs?" he asked. "Because you understand violence and duty?" "Partly. Also because the shifter world is honest about what it costs to protect the people you love. The human world likes to pretend that violence and sacrifice happen somewhere else, to someone else. You all know better." She met his eyes. "I appreciate that honesty. Even when it hurts." Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition. An understanding that went deeper than attraction or professional respect. "I'm sorry about your parents," Dominic said. "I'm sorry about your mother." She paused. "And I'm sorry I pushed about the Luna Protocol. You were right. Some things are too painful to excavate. You were right too, though. About the stories we need to remember." Dominic surprised himself with the admission. The Luna Protocol was created by my mother. She was trying to solve a problem that ultimately killed her. Sarah didn't push, didn't probe. She just waited, giving him space to continue or retreat as he chose. She believed that alphas needed partners, not subordinates. That pack strength came from balanced leadership, not solitary dominance. The Luna Protocol was her proposal for shared alpha authority, formal recognition of alpha mates as co-leaders rather than just decorative companions. That's revolutionary, Sarah breathed, especially for shifter culture. It was heresy, according to most of the old guard alphas, my father included. Dominic's jaw tightened with old anger. She fought for it anyway. Spent years building support, working with other alpha mates, documenting cases where shared leadership made packs stronger. What happened? She got sick. And when she was dying, my father disbanded the whole initiative, burned most of the documentation, told everyone it had been a mistake, a distraction. Dominic's voice went flat. He loved her in his way, but he couldn't accept that her vision might have been better than his tradition. That's why you reacted so strongly when I found the references. That's why I reacted. He looked at her. She died believing she'd failed, that her work meant nothing, and I was too young, too powerless to tell her different. Sarah's hand found his, her fingers threading through his with simple, genuine comfort. She didn't fail. You're here. You're the alpha she hoped you'd be, strong enough to lead, smart enough to listen, brave enough to question tradition when it doesn't serve your pack. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I've seen how your pack looks at you. Not with fear, with respect, with trust. That's not the kind of leadership that comes from dominance alone. She squeezed his hand. That's the kind of leadership your mother would have been proud of. Something cracked open in Dominic's chest. Something he'd been holding closed since he was 12 years old and watched his mother's funeral pyre burn against the night sky. He pulled Sarah closer, needing her warmth, her solid presence, her unflinching acceptance of his grief and doubt and vulnerability. She came willingly, wrapping the blanket around both of them as they sat on the cold steps under a sky full of stars. I have an Allied Alpha Summit tomorrow night, Dominic said after a long silence. Coordinating our response to Blood Moon. You should probably make yourself scarce. It's going to get political, possibly ugly. Want me to document it? There was a smile in her voice. Absolutely not. Worth a try. She leaned her head against his shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. Unity is strength, especially against someone trying to divide you. Look at you, dispensing strategic advice. I contain multitudes. She yawned. Also, I found more evidence of that old defense pact, including what looks like the original signed treaty. Might be useful ammunition if you need to remind Victor that his ancestors knew the value of cooperation. Dominic pressed a kiss to the top of her head without thinking, then froze, realizing what he'd done. Sarah went very still. I should, Dominic started. Don't. She lifted her head, those amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that stole his breath. Don't apologize. Don't pull away. Don't tell me this is a mistake or crossing a line or inappropriate fraternization with the pack historian. It's all of those things. I know. She reached up, her palm cupping his jaw with infinite gentleness. Do it anyway. It was the worst possible timing, with threats at his borders and war looming and responsibilities crushing down on him from every direction. But when Sarah rose up and kissed him, soft and sweet and certain, Dominic stopped thinking about timing or wisdom or any of the 100 reasons this was a terrible idea. He just kissed her back. Chapter 5. The Great Hall of Blackthorn Manor hadn't hosted an Alpha Summit in over a decade. By sunset the following evening, it was filled with power, tension, and the complicated politics of territorial shifters forced to cooperate. 7 alphas sat around the extended council table, each representing their pack and territory. Dominic knew them all, some as allies, some as reluctant partners, all as proud leaders who didn't enjoy being told what to do. Alpha Cassandra Reeves from the Silver Lake Pack in northern Montana. Sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, she controlled timber rights across 3 counties. Alpha Marcus Webb from the Iron Ridge Pack near the Canadian border. Old, experienced, and deeply traditional. Alpha Juliana Torres from the Cascade Pack in Washington. Young, progressive, and willing to challenge convention. Alpha Robert Chin from the Granite Peak Pack in Idaho. Wealthy, connected to human business interests, and politically savvy. Alpha David Foster from the Wind River Pack in Wyoming, a moderate voice who often served as mediator in interpack disputes. And 2 empty chairs, representing packs that had declined the invitation. "Let's address the elephant in the room," Cassandra said before Dominic could even call the meeting to order. 2 of our alliance members chose not to attend. "That's not a good sign." "They're afraid," Marcus Webb stated bluntly. "Victor's been making overtures, offering better trade terms, resource sharing, protection. They're hedging their bets. Or they've already chosen sides," Juliana added grimly. "We might be looking at a smaller alliance than we thought." Dominic had spent the day preparing for this meeting, reviewing strategies, coordinating with his council, and trying very hard not to think about the kiss he'd shared with Sarah on the back steps at 3 a.m. He'd failed spectacularly at that last part. "Our intelligence suggests Victor is making moves across the Northern Territories," Dominic said, bringing the discussion back to focus. He activated the digital map Marcus had prepared. "These are confirmed blood moon incursions over the last 3 weeks." Red dots appeared across the map, forming a disturbing pattern. Not random probing, calculated pressure on specific weak points. "He's isolating us," Robertson observed. "Splitting our alliance by targeting our most vulnerable members first." "Exactly." Dominic zoomed in on the Eastern Territories. "Which means our response needs to be immediate and coordinated. If Victor thinks he can pick us off one by one, we prove him wrong by presenting a united front." "What kind of front?" David Foster asked carefully. "We're talking about coordinated patrols? Shared resources? Or something more aggressive?" "All of the above." Dominic met each Alpha's gaze in turn. "I'm proposing a mutual defense pact. An attack on any alliance pack is treated as an attack on all. Combined patrol units on our shared borders. Intelligence sharing. And if Victor pushes this to open conflict, we respond together with overwhelming force." Silence fell over the room as each Alpha considered the implications. A mutual defense pact wasn't just political theater. It was a binding commitment that could draw them all into war. "You're asking us to risk our packs for Blackthorn's fight," Marcus Webb said finally. "I'm asking you to recognize that this isn't Blackthorn's fight, it's all of ours." Dominic's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Victor isn't stopping with my borders. He's testing the entire alliance structure. If we don't stand together now, we'll fall separately later." "He's right," Juliana said. "I've had Blood Moon scouts near my southern border for 2 weeks. They're watching, waiting, measuring our response." "Same here," Cassandra confirmed. 3 incidents in the last month. Nothing overtly aggressive, but the message is clear. They're coming. Robertson leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "A mutual defense pact requires council approval. That's Continental Accord law. The council will take months to deliberate while Victor continues making moves," Dominic countered. "We present them with a fait accompli, an alliance pact already in effect, with documented justification based on coordinated aggression. They'll rubber stamp it rather than admit they were too slow to prevent a crisis." "That's a dangerous gamble," David Foster said. "The council doesn't like being bypassed. The council doesn't have to defend these territories. We do." Dominic's alpha presence filled the room, not dominating but compelling. "I'm not asking you to follow me blindly. I'm asking you to recognize the threat and respond appropriately. Together." More silence. Then Cassandra stood, placing both hands flat on the table. "Silver Lake is in. Victor wants a fight, he'll get one." Juliana stood next. "Cascade Pack stands with Blackthorn." One by one, the other Alphas rose. Some quickly, some reluctantly, but all of them rising. United. Dominic felt something tight in his chest release. "Then we have an alliance. Marcus will coordinate the details, patrol schedules, communication protocols, resource sharing. We'll present a formal document to the council within the week." "And Victor?" Marcus Webb asked. "Do we contact him directly? Issue a warning?" "No." Dominic's smile was cold. "We let our actions speak. Double patrols on all borders. Joint training exercises. Make it very clear that aggression against one of us means war with all of us. Victor's smart. He'll get the message. And if he doesn't?" Robertson pressed. "Then we remind him why our ancestors signed that original defense pact in 1967. Dominic pulled up documents on the screen. Sarah's discovery from the archives. Blood Moon and Blackthorn have a history of cooperation against common threats. We also have a treaty that was never formally dissolved, which means Victor's current actions violate his own pack's legal commitments. Cassandra whistled low. Where did you dig that up? New pack historian. She's been going through our archives. Dominic kept his expression carefully neutral. Turns out documentation has its uses. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, hammering out details and contingencies. By the time the alphas dispersed, some to guest rooms in the manor, others returning to their own territories, Dominic's head was pounding and his wolf was restless from hours of political maneuvering. He found Marcus in the security office, coordinating the new patrol schedules. That went better than expected, his beta observed. I thought Webb was going to push back harder. He wanted to, but even he can see the threat. Dominic studied the patrol routes on Marcus's computer screen. Double-check the eastern sectors. That's where Victor will test us first. Already on it. Marcus paused. The historian was asking about the summit. I told her it was pack business. Good. Dominic's response was automatic, even as part of him wondered what Sarah would make of the alliance politics. Dom. Marcus's tone shifted, became more personal. Is there something going on with her? What do you mean? I mean, I've known you for 20 years, and I've never seen you look at anyone the way you look at her. Marcus met his eyes steadily. She's human. She's temporary. And she's the council's representative. That's 3 kinds of complicated you don't need right now. There's nothing going on. The lie tasted bitter. If you say so. Marcus didn't sound convinced. Just be careful. We're heading toward potential war. Distraction could get people killed. I know. Dominic headed for the door. Which is why there's nothing going on. He almost believed it himself. Sarah was in the archives as usual, surrounded by open ledgers and her ever-present laptop. She looked up when Dominic entered, and something in her expression made his heart clench. How did it go? She asked. We have an alliance. Formal mutual defense pact, pending council approval. He closed the door behind him, needing privacy for a conversation he shouldn't be having. Your documents helped. The old defense treaty gave us historical precedent. I'm glad. She set down her pen. Dominic, we need to talk about last night. I know. That kiss was a mistake. The words came out harder than he intended. I was exhausted, stressed, and I crossed a line I had no business crossing. Sarah flinched as if he'd struck her. A mistake. You're the council's representative. You're human. You're temporary. He forced himself to say what Marcus had already voiced. This, whatever this is, can't happen. Not now. Not with everything else happening. So that's it. You get to decide unilaterally that what we both felt doesn't matter. What we both felt is irrelevant compared to pack safety. Dominic's alpha voice leaked through despite his efforts to control it. I have responsibilities, Sarah. People depending on me. I can't afford to be distracted by. By what? By someone who sees you as more than just an alpha. By someone who actually gives a damn about the person underneath all that responsibility. Her eyes blazed with anger and hurt. God forbid you let yourself feel something, Dominic. That might actually make you human. Or shifter. Whatever. She threw his own words back at him, and they hit like physical blows. That's not fair. Life's not fair. Leadership's not fair. Love definitely isn't fair. She stood, gathering her materials with sharp, angry movements. But you already know that, don't you? That's why you're so good at pushing people away before they can get close enough to matter. Sarah, save it. She shoved her laptop into her bag. You made your position clear. Professional boundaries, emotional distance, no distractions. I get it. Message received. She was halfway to the door when Dominic moved, his shifter speed closing the distance before conscious thought caught up. He caught her wrist gently, pulling her to a stop. Wait. Why? But she didn't pull away. Because I'm lying. The admission felt like bleeding. It does matter. You matter. And that terrifies me more than Victor Strand or the council, or any threat I can fight with tooth and claw. Sarah turned slowly, her amber eyes searching his face. Why does it terrify you? Because everyone I've ever loved has left. My mother died. My father became a stranger. The one woman I thought I might build a life with chose a safer pack, a safer alpha, because I was too much work, too much responsibility, too much everything. Dominic's voice went rough. And you're human, Sarah. You'll age while I stay the same. You'll want things I can't give you. You'll leave too, eventually. They all do. That's a lot of assumptions about what I want. Her free hand came up to cup his face. Did you ever think to ask me? What's the point? The answer doesn't change the circumstances. The answer is everything, you stubborn alpha. She pushed up on her toes, bringing their faces close. I'm not afraid of your responsibility. I'm not intimidated by your power. And I'm not stupid enough to think this would be easy. But I'm also not walking away just because you're scared. I'm not. You are. You're terrified of letting someone in. Of sharing the burden like your mother wanted. Of admitting that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to face everything alone. Her thumb brushed across his cheekbone. I see you, Dominic Blackthorne. The alpha and the man. The strength and the vulnerability. And I'm not running. Dominic's wolf was howling now, demanding he claim her, keep her, make her understand that she was his in every way that mattered. But his human side knew better. Knew that wanting her wasn't enough. That feeling things didn't make them work. That sometimes, the brave choice was walking away before anyone got hurt worse. I can't do this right now, he said finally. Not with everything else. Not when I need to be focused on keeping my pack safe. Then when? Sarah challenged. After the blood moon crisis? After the next crisis? After you've convinced yourself that you've earned the right to want something for yourself. She shook her head. Life doesn't work that way. There's always another crisis. Always another reason to wait. Always another excuse to choose duty over happiness. My duty is my happiness. Liar. But she said it gently, with understanding rather than accusation. Your duty is your purpose. Your identity. Your reason for existing. But it's not your happiness. And pretending otherwise is going to destroy you eventually. She pulled away from him then, and this time he let her go. I'm going to finish my work here, she said quietly. 3 months, maybe 4. I'll document your history, provide the council with their reports, and then I'll leave like you expect. But Dominic, don't think for a second that I wanted to. Don't tell yourself I chose to go. This is your choice. Your wall. Your protection. Sarah, I'll see you tomorrow, Alpha. The title was a barrier now, distance deliberately inserted. Professional boundaries like you wanted. She left, taking the warmth and wildflower scent and possibility with her. Dominic stood alone in the archive room, surrounded by the ghosts of his ancestors' choices, and wondered if he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. His wolf certainly thought so. It was snarling and pacing, furious at being denied what it recognized as mate, as partner, as home. But Dominic had spent 35 years learning to control his wolf, learning to choose strategy over instinct, learning to sacrifice personal happiness for pack safety. He could do it again. He had to, even if it felt like tearing out his own heart. The attack came 3 nights later. Not on Blackthorn territory. Victor was too smart for that. Instead, Blood Moon wolves hit the smallest of their alliance packs, the Mountain Crest Pack near the Idaho-Montana border. The call came at 2 a.m., Alpha Richard Morrison's voice tight with controlled panic. Dominic, we need help. Now. Dominic was already moving, his wolf surging to the surface as he processed the information. How many? At least 20 Blood Moon wolves. They hit our western border, took out 2 patrol units before we could respond. We're holding them at the perimeter, but we're outnumbered. Hold position. Reinforcements are coming. Dominic was already pulling on clothes, his mind racing through response times and tactical options. 15 minutes. He made 3 more calls in rapid succession. Marcus, to mobilize Blackthorn's elite response team. Cassandra Reeves, whose Silver Lake territory was closest to Mountain Crest. And Juliana Torres, whose Cascade Pack had the most combat-trained fighters. Within 10 minutes, 30 shifters were loaded into vehicles and racing toward Mountain Crest territory. Dominic rode in the lead SUV, his phone lighting up with updates from the other Alliance alphas. Everyone was responding. Everyone was coming, united like they'd promised. This is it, Marcus said from the driver's seat. Victor's opening move. He picked the weakest pack, expecting us to hesitate or argue about whether to actually honor the defense pact. Then we show him what unified response looks like. Dominic's voice was granite. No mercy, no prisoners. Blood Moon wolves on our allies' territory are treated as enemy combatants. You're authorizing lethal force? I'm authorizing defense of our alliance. If Blood Moon wolves want to walk away, they can. But if they fight, we end them. Dominic's eyes glowed gold in the darkness. Victor wanted to test us. Let's make sure he doesn't like the results. They reached Mountain Crest territory in 12 minutes. The sound of fighting audible even from the access road. Dominic was out of the vehicle before it fully stopped, shifting mid-stride into his wolf form. He was massive in wolf form, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, with steel-gray fur that matched his eyes and presence that made even enemy wolves hesitate. His pack flowed behind him, 28 wolves moving as one deadly unit. The battle was chaos. Mountain Crest wolves were holding a defensive line near their pack house, bloodied but unbroken. Blood Moon wolves circled like sharks, testing for weaknesses, pressing attacks in coordinated waves. Dominic hit them like a freight train. He took down the nearest Blood Moon wolf with a single strike, his jaws closing around its throat with lethal precision. The wolf went down gurgling, and Dominic was already moving to the next target. His pack followed his lead, crashing into Blood Moon's forces with overwhelming violence. Blackthorn wolves were larger, better trained, and fighting with the fury of defenders rather than aggressors. Within minutes, the tide turned. Blood Moon wolves began retreating, their coordinated assault dissolving into panicked flight. Dominic let them go. No point in pursuing into unknown territory where Victor might have reinforcements waiting. More vehicles arrived, disgorging Silver Lake and Cascade pack fighters. But by then it was essentially over. Blood Moon had retreated, leaving 4 dead wolves behind and taking their other casualties with them. Dominic shifted back to human form, accepting the clothes Marcus threw him. Around him, his pack was doing the same, checking injuries and securing the perimeter. Alpha Richard Morrison approached, his arm in an improvised sling, but his expression grateful. "Thank you. If you hadn't responded so quickly." "That's what the Alliance means." Dominic cut him off. "An attack on you is an attack on all of us." Victor learned that lesson tonight. Other Alphas arrived over the next hour, some bringing reinforcements, some arriving after the fighting had ended. But all of them coming, all of them honoring their commitment. By dawn, 7 Alpha packs stood united in Mountain Crest territory, their combined presence a statement Victor Strand couldn't possibly miss. "He'll retaliate," Cassandra predicted as they gathered for a quick strategy session. This was too public a failure. Victor doesn't forgive embarrassment. "Let him try." Dominic's voice was cold. "Every pack in this alliance is now on high alert. Our shared patrol protocols are active. And I guarantee word of tonight's response is already spreading through the territorial networks. Other packs will think twice before accepting Victor's offers if they know it means facing all of us." "We should contact the council now," David Foster urged. "Document this attack, get official sanction for our defense." "Agreed." Dominic nodded. "Marcus will file a formal complaint with detailed evidence. Victor just gave us exactly what we needed. Proof that Blood Moon is actively aggressive and justification for our alliance response." They talked for another hour, coordinating ongoing security measures and ensuring Mountain Crest had the support to rebuild their defensive capabilities. By the time Dominic headed back to Blackthorn territory, the sun was fully risen and exhaustion was pulling at him like a physical weight. Marcus drove, letting Dominic close his eyes for the first time in 20 hours. "You did good tonight," his beta said quietly. The pack responded perfectly. The alliance held. Victor's plan backfired. "This was just the opening move," Dominic replied without opening his eyes. "Victor's going to escalate. He has to or he loses face. Then we'll be ready." They would be. Dominic had made sure of that. His pack was prepared, his alliances were strong, his strategies sound. So why did victory feel hollow? He knew the answer, even if he didn't want to admit it. Because Sarah wasn't there to share it with. Because he'd pushed her away, chosen duty over happiness, walls over vulnerability. Because he'd done exactly what she'd predicted. Convinced himself that later was better, that waiting was safer, that he didn't deserve to want things for himself. When they arrived back at the manor, Dominic went straight to his office to start the formal reports. He worked for 3 hours straight, documenting every detail of the attack and response for the council's review. He was so focused that he didn't notice Sarah standing in the doorway until she spoke. "You're hurt." Dominic looked up, then down at himself. His left arm was bleeding from a wound he'd barely registered during the fighting. Nothing serious, it would heal within hours, but apparently obvious enough to draw her concern. "It's nothing," he said. "Let me." She entered without waiting for permission, pulling a first aid kit from seemingly nowhere. "I know it'll heal fast, but infection is still a risk." She was right, though he'd never have bothered treating it himself. Dominic watched as she cleaned the wound with efficient, gentle hands, her touch making his wolf settle in ways that combat and victory never could. "I heard about the attack," she said quietly, not looking up from her work. "The whole manor's talking about it. About how you responded so fast, how the alliance held, how you sent Victor a message he won't forget. Information travels fast. It does in a pack house." She finished bandaging his arm, but didn't pull away. "You could have been killed. I'm an alpha. Risk comes with the territory. That doesn't make it easier to hear about. To imagine." Her voice went thick. "To sit here wondering if you're coming back." Dominic caught her hand, holding it against his chest where his heart was still racing from combat adrenaline. "Sarah, I know. Professional boundaries. Your choice. I'm just making it really awkward by caring anyway." She tried to smile, but it came out wrong. "I'll work on that." "Don't." She looked up, confusion and hope warring in her amber eyes. "Don't what?" "Don't stop caring. Don't pull away. Don't make this easy for me." Dominic pulled her closer, until she was standing between his knees, until he could feel her warmth and smell wildflowers and know that she was real, hear his. "I was wrong. About everything. The walls. The distance. The idea that I have to choose between duty and happiness." He rested his forehead against hers. "I nearly died tonight. 3 times. And every time, the only thought in my head was that I'd never told you how I feel. Never admitted that you've become essential in ways I don't fully understand. Never gave us a chance to see what this could be." Dominic. His name was a prayer and a question. "I'm still scared," he admitted. "Still convinced this is going to end badly. Still certain I'll let you down somehow. But Sarah, I'd rather face that fear with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what if." She kissed him then, fierce and claiming, and Dominic kissed her back with everything he'd been holding in check. Relief and desire and need and something deeper. Something that felt dangerously like love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah's smile was radiant. "Took you long enough, Alpha. I'm a slow learner." He pulled her into his lap, kneading her close. "But I'm teachable." "Good. Because we have a lot to figure out." She settled against his chest, her head tucked under his chin. "The council's going to have opinions about this. You're packed too. And we still haven't solved the whole I'm human and you're not situation. We'll figure it out. Together." Dominic breathed in her scent, let himself finally believe that maybe, possibly, he was allowed to have this. "That's what partners do." "Partners." She tested the word. "I like that. So do I." They sat in comfortable silence as dawn light filled the office, the weight of the world still pressing down, but somehow lighter when shared. Outside, the pack was stirring, preparing for another day of heightened security and potential conflict. Victor Strand was out there somewhere, planning his next move. The council would be demanding explanations and oversight. But for this moment, Dominic let himself just be. Not alpha, not leader, just a man holding a woman who saw past his walls and challenged him to be better. It was enough. It was everything. Chapter 6. The council's response came 48 hours after Dominic filed his formal report. It was not what he'd hoped for. "They're sending an investigator?" Dominic's voice was dangerously quiet as he read the official communication. "To determine if our defensive response was proportionate and justified." Marcus winced. "Standard procedure, apparently. Any use of lethal force in interpack conflict requires council review. We were defending an allied pack from unprovoked aggression. For Blood Moon wolves died because they attacked us, not because we hunted them down." Dominic's grip on his phone was tight enough to crack the screen. "What exactly requires investigation?" "Politics." Sarah's voice came from the doorway, where she'd been quietly observing the morning briefing. "The council has to appear impartial, which means investigating both sides regardless of who's obviously in the wrong. It's theater." Dominic turned to her, seeing the understanding in her amber eyes. She'd been attending more pack meetings over the last 2 days, her role shifting from outsider historian to something closer to advisor. The pack had noticed. So had Marcus, though he'd kept his opinions to himself. "How long do we have before this investigator arrives?" Dominic asked Marcus. 3 days. Her name is Margaret Thorne. She's senior council enforcement, very by the book. Marcus pulled up her file on his tablet. Former Alpha from the Eastern Territories. Retired from pack leadership 5 years ago to work for the council full-time. "An Alpha will understand pack dynamics better than a bureaucrat," Sarah observed. "That could work in your favor. Or against us if she's more loyal to council authority than pack sovereignty. Dominic studied the woman's photo. Steel gray hair, sharp features, eyes that looked like they'd seen everything and been impressed by none of it. We need to be prepared. Full documentation of the attack, medical reports, witness statements, everything. Already compiling it, Marcus assured him. But Dominic, there's something else. The 2 packs that declined to join our alliance, they've formally aligned with Blood Moon. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. When? Dominic's voice was ice. Announced this morning. They're citing concerns about aggressive posturing and preference for diplomatic solutions. Marcus's expression was grim. Victor offered them trade advantages and security guarantees. They took the deal. They chose the wrong side. Cassandra Reeves had joined the meeting via video call, her face filling one of the monitors. Those packs are going to regret it when Victor decides their usefulness has expired. That's their problem now, Juliana Torres added from another screen. Our concern is whether any other alliance packs are considering the same move. I've been in contact with everyone, Dominic said. So far, our alliance is holding. The response to Mountain Crest proved we're serious about mutual defense. That means something. It means Victor can't pick us off individually anymore, David Foster observed. So he's going to try something bigger, more coordinated, more devastating. Let him try. Dominic's alpha presence rolled through the room, even via video conference. We're ready. They spent the next hour coordinating intelligence, sharing, and defensive strategies. By the time the meeting ended, Dominic's head was pounding and his wolf was restless from too many hours in human form dealing with politics instead of action. Sarah waited until the office cleared before approaching his desk. You need a break, she said simply. I need to prepare for this council investigator. You need to not burn out before she even arrives. Sarah rounded the desk, taking his hand and pulling him to his feet. Come with me. Sarah, that wasn't a request, Alpha. Her smile took the edge off the command. I found something in the archives you need to see, and it requires getting out of this office and away from screens and politics for at least an hour. Dominic wanted to argue, to insist he had too much work, too many responsibilities. But the warm pressure of her hand in his and the promise in her eyes made him reconsider. 1 hour, he conceded. We'll see. She led him through the manor and out to the eastern gardens, where spring was painting everything in shades of green and gold. The morning sun was warm on Dominic's face, and he realized with some surprise that he couldn't remember the last time he'd been outside during daylight hours for anything other than pack business. Sarah had set up a small workspace under an old oak tree. Her laptop, several archive boxes, and a blanket spread across the grass like a picnic. What is this? Dominic asked. This is what's called work-life balance. She pulled him down to sit beside her. You can still work, but you're doing it somewhere that doesn't make you feel like the walls are closing in. She wasn't wrong. The open air and natural surroundings did make his wolf settle. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Now, Sarah said, opening one of the archive boxes. I found these letters in a hidden compartment in one of the older ledgers. They're from your mother. Dominic went very still. My mother. Written to your father over the course of several years, before you were born. Sarah handled the yellowed pages with careful reverence. They're beautiful, Dominic. And they talk extensively about her vision for pack leadership, about the Luna Protocol, about partnership and balance. She handed him the first letter, and Dominic's hands trembled slightly as he recognized his mother's elegant handwriting. My dearest Thomas, you asked me yesterday why I continue to push for change when tradition has served our people for so long. Let me answer you as honestly as I can. Tradition isn't wrong, but tradition that doesn't evolve becomes prison. Our packs are changing, the world around us is changing, and we must change with it or be left behind. The Luna Protocol isn't about diminishing alphas or disrupting pack hierarchy. It's about recognizing that leadership is stronger when shared, that 2 perspectives are wiser than one, that balance creates resilience. I love you, my fierce wolf, but I also challenge you. That's what partnership means. Not blind obedience, but mutual respect and the courage to question each other toward better answers. Think about it. Forever yours. Elizabeth. Dominic read the letter twice, his throat tight with emotion. This was his mother's voice, preserved across decades, speaking truths his father had tried to bury. There are 43 more, Sarah said softly. A complete record of her philosophy, her arguments, her vision for what pack leadership could be. Why didn't my father destroy these too? Maybe he couldn't bring himself to. Or maybe he knew that someday someone would need to find them. She leaned against his shoulder. Your mother was brilliant, Dominic. Revolutionary. These letters should be published, shared with other packs. They could change how alphas think about partnership and power. Dominic carefully set down the letter, his mind reeling with implications. The council would never allow it. Too disruptive to established pack structures. The council doesn't get to decide what ideas are worth sharing. Sarah's voice carried quiet steel. And besides, you're not your father. You don't have to protect tradition at the expense of truth. She was right. Dominic had spent years trying to honor his father's memory, to lead the way he'd been taught. But maybe that wasn't the legacy worth preserving. Maybe his mother's vision was. I want to read them all, he said finally. Every letter. Every word. Good. Sarah smiled, pulling out the next several letters. Because I think they have answers you've been looking for. About leadership. About partnership. About what it means to be alpha. They spent the next 2 hours in the garden, Dominic reading his mother's words while Sarah worked on her documentation. It was peaceful, companionable, and exactly what Dominic hadn't known he needed. The letters painted a picture of a woman who was both strong and gentle, traditional and progressive, devoted to her mate while refusing to be diminished by him. She'd fought for the Luna Protocol, not out of ambition, but out of genuine belief that packs would be stronger with balanced leadership. And she'd been right. Dominic thought about his own leadership style. The way he'd shouldered everything alone, trusted his instincts over counsel, made decisions in isolation. It had worked, mostly. But it had also been exhausting, limiting, and increasingly lonely. Until Sarah. She'd challenged him from day one, refusing to submit or stay silent, pushing him to reconsider assumptions and question traditions. Just like his mother had done with his father. The parallel wasn't lost on him. What are you thinking? Sarah asked, looking up from her laptop. That you would have liked my mother, and she would have loved you. Sarah's expression softened. That's one of the nicest things you've ever said to me. It's true. Dominic set aside the letters, turning to face her fully. She believed alphas needed partners who would challenge them, push them, refuse to let them become tyrants through isolation. That's exactly what you do. Is that your way of saying I'm annoying but useful? It's my way of saying you're essential. He cupped her face in his palm. The pack sees it too. You've been attending meetings, offering insights, connecting dots we miss. You're already functioning as more than just a historian. Are you offering me a job, Alpha Blackthorn? I'm offering you a place. In my pack. In my life. In whatever form you want it to take. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I know it's complicated. I know we haven't figured out all the details. But Sarah, I don't want you to leave when your contract ends. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. What are you saying? I'm saying stay. Not as the council's representative, but as mine. My advisor. My partner. He hesitated, the word catching in his throat. You're what? She prompted gently. My mate. The word came out rough, honest. If you'll have me. If you're willing to take on a stubborn alpha and his complicated pack and all the chaos that comes with it. Dominic. She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Yes. To all of it. Yes. Relief and joy crashed through Dominic's chest. His wolf surged forward, recognizing mate, claiming her on every level that mattered. The council's not going to like this, Sarah said when they finally broke apart. Their historian mating with the alpha she's supposed to be objectively documenting. Then they'll have to be disappointed. Dominic pulled her closer. I'm done choosing duty over happiness. Done letting fear make my decisions. My mother fought for the right to be equal partners with her mate. The least I can do is honor that vision with mine. Mate. Sarah tested the word, smiling. I like how that sounds. So do I. Dominic stood, pulling her to her feet. Come on. We need to tell Marcus before he has a heart attack from all the rumors flying around the pack house. They walked back to the manor hand in hand, and if anyone noticed or had opinions, they kept them carefully silent. And Alpha's personal choices weren't up for pack vote. Marcus, predictably, had opinions anyway. Are you insane? His voice was carefully controlled as he closed Dominic's office door behind him. The council investigator arrives in 3 days. Victor's planning his next move. We're holding a fragile alliance together with duct tape and hope. And you decide now is the perfect time to claim a human mate? I didn't decide anything, Dominic said calmly. It just is. Sarah is my mate. That's not debatable. Everything's debatable when you're under council scrutiny. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Dom, I'm happy for you truly. But the timing is never going to be perfect. There's always a crisis. Always a reason to wait. Always an excuse to choose duty over everything else. Dominic met his beta's eyes steadily. My mother spent her life arguing that alphas needed equal partners. I'm finally taking that advice. Marcus studied him for a long moment, then sighed. You're really sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Then I'm happy for you. Both of you. Marcus's expression softened slightly. But Dominic, the pack's going to have questions. Concerns. Some of the older members won't like the idea of a human Luna. Then they're welcome to take those concerns to me directly. Dominic's tone left no room for argument. Sarah is my choice. My mate. Anyone who can't accept that can leave. That's a hard line. It's the only line I'm drawing. Dominic leaned back in his chair. I've spent 10 years leading this pack. I've kept them safe, prosperous, and strong. I've earned the right to make my own choice about who I share my life with. Marcus nodded slowly. You're right. And for what it's worth, I like her. She's smart, tough, and she doesn't take your crap. That's exactly what you need. I know. Dominic smiled slightly. Now, about this council investigator. How do we prepare? They spent the next several hours going over every detail of the Mountain Crest defense, ensuring their documentation was ironclad. Sarah joined them, offering insights about council procedures and what Margaret Thorne would likely focus on during her investigation. She fit seamlessly into the discussion, her knowledge of pack politics and legal frameworks complementing Dominic's strategic thinking and Marcus's operational expertise. By late afternoon, they had a comprehensive strategy for handling the council's scrutiny. One more thing, Sarah said as they were wrapping up. I should probably move my things out of the guest quarters. Both men looked at her. Why? Dominic asked. Because everyone's going to know about us by nightfall, and having your mate in the guest wing sends the wrong message. She said it matter-of-factly, but Dominic caught the nervous flutter in her pulse. Unless you'd prefer to wait. No. Dominic stood, crossing to her. You're right. You belong in my quarters. Our quarters. The possessiveness in his voice made her eyes darken with heat. Then I should probably go pack. I'll help. Dominic glanced at Marcus. We're done here. Yeah, we're done. Marcus was grinning now. Go be domestic, Alpha. I'll hold down the fort. Dominic and Sarah left the office together, and the pack house seemed to buzz with awareness as they passed. Everyone knew. Everyone was watching. Everyone had opinions. Dominic didn't care. For the first time in his adult life, he was choosing something for himself. Not because it was strategic or diplomatic or politically advantageous. Just because it made him happy. Because she made him happy. They reached Sarah's guest quarters, and she began gathering her belongings with practiced efficiency. She didn't have much. This was temporary housing, after all, but each item she packed felt significant. A claiming. A commitment. Nervous? Dominic asked, watching her. Terrified. She smiled, but in a good way, like standing on the edge of something incredible and scary and knowing you're about to jump. I'll catch you. I know. She crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. That's why I'm jumping. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus stuck his head in, his expression grim. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Eastern Border Patrol just found something. You need to see this. The piece shattered. Dominic's alpha instincts snapped back into focus. What is it? Another message from Victor. And this one's personal. The eastern border clearing was bathed in the harsh glow of portable floodlights when Dominic arrived. A dozen pack members stood in a protective circle around something on the ground, their expressions ranging from anger to unease. Marcus led him to the center of the circle, and Dominic felt his wolf surge forward with murderous rage. Someone had spray-painted a message on a massive boulder that marked the boundary between Blackthorn and neutral territory. Your alliance won't save you. Your human won't either. Versus. Beside the boulder, arranged with deliberate care, was a crown made of thorns and soaked in what smelled like blood. A direct threat, not just to Dominic's pack, but to Sarah specifically. Victor knows about her, Marcus said quietly, and he's using her to get to you. Dominic's hands clenched into fists. When was this found? 20 minutes ago. Third shift patrol spotted it during their sweep. Marcus gestured to the crown. The blood is dear, not shifter or human. But the message is clear. He's threatening what you care about most. Dominic forced himself to think strategically, to push past the fury clouding his judgment. Victor knowing about Sarah made sense. Pack politics were full of gossip and intelligence networks. Using that knowledge to provoke him was classic Victor. But it was also a mistake, because now this wasn't just about territory or pride or pack alliances. Now it was personal. Double the security around the manor, Dominic commanded. No one in or out without explicit clearance. And I want eyes on Sarah at all times when she's not with me. Already done, Marcus confirmed. But Dominic, this changes things. Victor's not just targeting pack lands anymore. He's targeting you personally, your mate specifically. Then he's going to learn what happens when you threaten what's mine. Dominic's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Get me Victor's location. I'm done playing defense. You can't go after him directly. That's exactly what he wants, to provoke you into breaking pack law, giving the council justification to intervene on his side. Marcus was right, and Dominic hated it. Then what do you suggest? We wait. We protect what's ours. We let the council investigators see exactly who the aggressor is. Marcus met his eyes steadily. And we trust that the alliance is strong enough to hold against whatever Victor throws at us next. It was sound strategy. Logical. Patient. It also felt like swallowing glass. Fine, Dominic bit out. But I want surveillance on every approach to our territory. I want contingency plans for evacuation if necessary. And I want Sarah moved to the most secure part of the manor. She's not going to like being treated like a China doll, Marcus observed. She doesn't have to like it. She just has to be safe. Dominic turned away from the threatening message, his mind already racing through worst-case scenarios. Come on. I need to tell her what's happening before pack gossip does. They drove back to the manor in tense silence. By the time they arrived, word had already spread. Pack members were on high alert, extra security posted at every entrance, the whole compound radiating controlled aggression. Dominic found Sarah in his quarters, their quarters now, unpacking the last of her belongings. She looked up as he entered, and her expression immediately shifted from contentment to concern. What happened? He told her, watching her face go from worried to angry to grimly determined. So Victor knows about us, she said when he finished. And he's trying to use me as leverage against you. He's trying. He won't succeed. Dominic moved to her, framing her face in his hands. But Sarah, you need to understand, you're in danger now. Real danger. Victor doesn't make idle threats. I know. She covered his hands with hers. But I'm not running. I'm not hiding. And I'm definitely not becoming a bargaining chip he can use against you. That's not your choice. Her eyes flashed. Yes, it is. I'm not some helpless damsel who needs protection. I've survived 5 years working with territorial shifters. I can handle Victor Strand. You're human, Sarah. Against a pack of aggressive shifters, you're vulnerable. The words tasted like poison, but they were true. Let me protect you. Please. She saw the fear beneath his alpha control, the genuine terror that something might happen to her. Her expression softened. Okay, she said quietly. But on one condition. You stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I can be cautious without being sidelined. I can accept protection without becoming helpless. Fair enough. Dominic pulled her against his chest, breathing in her wildflower scent. Just stay close. Stay alert. And trust that I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. I trust you. She tilted her head up, brushing her lips against his. Now come to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a long day, and you need rest. She was right. The council investigator arrived in less than 72 hours. Victor was escalating his campaign. The alliance was under strain. But for tonight, Dominic let himself just hold his mate and pretend the world couldn't touch them here, in the safety of their shared space. It was an illusion, but a comforting one. He'd face reality again in the morning. For now, this was enough. Chapter 7. Margaret Thorne arrived exactly on time, driving herself in a nondescript sedan that looked entirely too ordinary for someone with her reputation. She was smaller than Dominic expected, maybe 5'6", with steel gray hair cut in a no-nonsense bob and eyes that assessed everything with clinical precision. She was also an alpha, and her presence filled the manor's entrance hall with unmistakable power. Dominic met her at the door, flanked by Marcus and Sarah. First impressions mattered, and he wanted Thorn to see a unified front from the beginning. Alpha Blackthorn. Thorn's handshake was firm, professional. Thank you for accommodating my investigation on short notice. Council oversight is part of territorial law, Dominic replied neutrally. We're prepared to cooperate fully. Thorn's gaze flicked to Sarah, lingered for a fraction too long, then moved to Marcus. I'll need access to all documentation related to the Mountain Crest incident, as well as interviews with key personnel who participated in the defensive response. Everything's prepared for your review, Marcus said. We've set up a workspace in the West Wing conference room. Excellent. Thorn picked up her briefcase. I'd like to start immediately. Time is a factor. The council wants my preliminary report within 72 hours. They led her to the conference room, where Marcus had indeed prepared everything. Incident reports, medical files, witness statements, even drone footage of the Mountain Crest territory showing the scope of Bloodmoon's attack. Thorn settled in without ceremony, pulling out her laptop and recording equipment. I'll begin with you, Alpha Blackthorn. Please describe the events leading up to your defensive response. For the next 3 hours, Dominic walked Thorn through everything. The initial border provocations, the formation of the Alliance Pact, the attack on Mountain Crest, and their coordinated response. He kept his answers precise, factual, and supported by documentation. Thorn asked pointed questions, probing for inconsistencies or evidence of excessive force. But Dominic had been an alpha for a decade. He knew how to navigate political interrogations. You authorized lethal force, Thorn noted. Not quite accusatory, but definitely pointed. I authorized defense of Allied territory. Bloodmoon wolves had the option to retreat at any point, for chose to continue fighting and died as a result. Some might argue that 28 Blackthorn wolves against roughly 20 Bloodmoon constituted overwhelming force designed to kill rather than repel. Some might argue that responding to an attack on an allied pack with insufficient force would have emboldened further aggression. Dominic held her gaze steadily. I made the choice that protected my allies and sent a clear message about the cost of attacking our alliance. Thorn made notes, her expression giving nothing away. Tell me about the alliance itself. When was it formed? Under what authority? 2 weeks ago, in response to coordinated border provocations by Bloodmoon Pack across multiple territories. Dominic pulled up the alliance documentation. 7 packs, Mutual Defense Pact, intelligence sharing protocols. We filed formal notice with the Council's territorial office. After the fact, within 48 hours of formation, which is compliant with Continental Accord timelines. Dominic kept his tone even. We didn't need Council permission to form a defensive alliance. We only needed to notify them of its existence. True, Thorn studied the documents. But some might say you deliberately bypassed diplomatic channels to avoid Council oversight of your response to Bloodmoon aggression. Some might say the Council's diplomatic channels moved too slowly to address active threats. Dominic leaned forward slightly. Investigator Thorn, let me be blunt. Victor Strand has been systematically probing our territories, testing our defenses, and building toward confrontation for weeks. When he finally attacked, we responded appropriately and in accordance with PAC law. If the Council has a problem with that, they're welcome to suggest alternative strategies that don't involve waiting to be slaughtered while bureaucrats debate procedure. A ghost of a smile crossed Thorn's face. You don't like the Council much, do you, Alpha Blackthorn? I respect the Council's role in maintaining inter-pack order. I don't respect political theater that prioritizes appearance over substance. He paused. With respect, investigator. Noted. Thorn closed her laptop. I'd like to speak with your beta next, then several of the pack members who participated in the defense. And I'll need to visit the Mountain Crest territory to assess the attack site personally. Marcus will coordinate whatever you need. Dominic stood. Anything else? Yes, actually. Thorn's gaze sharpened. I'd like to speak with Ms. Montague. Privately. Sarah, who'd been silent throughout the interview, straightened in her chair. Why? Because you're the Council's appointed historian, which makes you technically my colleague on this investigation. I'm curious about your perspective on pack dynamics here. Thorn's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Purely professional curiosity, of course. Dominic's wolf bristled, protective instincts surging. But before he could object, Sarah spoke. Of course, investigator. I'm happy to discuss my observations. She glanced at Dominic, a silent communication passing between them. Trust me. He didn't like it, but he nodded. I'll be in my office if you need me. He left, though every instinct screamed at him to stay, to protect, to prevent whatever interrogation Thorne had planned. But Sarah was capable of handling herself. She'd proven that repeatedly. He just hoped Thorne recognized that fact. Sarah waited until Dominic's footsteps faded down the hallway before turning her full attention to Margaret Thorne. The older woman studied her with those sharp, assessing eyes. You're sleeping with him. So much for professional curiosity. That's a personal question, investigator. It's a relevant question. You're supposed to be providing objective historical documentation for the council. Instead, you're romantically involved with the alpha you're documenting. Thorne's expression remained neutral. That's a significant conflict of interest. It would be, if my relationship with Dominic affected my professional integrity. Sarah met the investigator's gaze without flinching. But it doesn't. My reports to the council have been thorough, accurate, and unbiased. Have they? Or have you been documenting only what serves Blackthorn interests? I've been documenting the truth, which, in this case, happens to align with Blackthorn interests because they're the ones being aggressed upon. Sarah pulled out her tablet, opening her work files. Every incident I've recorded has been cross-referenced with multiple sources. Every document I've cataloged has been preserved in its original form, not edited or sanitized. And every observation I've made has been supported by evidence. Thorne took the tablet, scrolling through Sarah's meticulously organized records. Minutes passed in silence as the investigator reviewed everything: territorial agreements, border incident reports, historical precedents, even the letters from Elizabeth Blackthorne. Finally, Thorne looked up. This is impressive work, Ms. Montague. More thorough than most council historians manage in twice the time. Thank you. It's also clearly sympathetic to Blackthorn Pack. You've documented their strengths, their history of fair dealing, their commitment to alliance partners. Where's the critical analysis? The examination of potential overreach or aggressive tendencies. In a separate file marked Concerns and Patterns. Sarah pulled it up, showing Thorne pages of notes about Dominic's tendency toward isolation, his sometimes autocratic decision-making, his struggle with delegation. I document everything, investigator. The good and the problematic. But I'm not going to manufacture concerns where none exist just to appear balanced. Thorne read through the concerns file with the same careful attention. You're in love with him. It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. Yes. And you think that doesn't compromise your objectivity? I think my objectivity comes from caring enough to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Sarah leaned forward. Dominic Blackthorne is a good alpha. Not perfect. No one is. But genuinely committed to his pack's well-being. He didn't want me here initially. He fought the council's appointment. But he gave me full access anyway, because he understood that transparency serves everyone better than secrets. Or because he wanted to control the narrative. If he wanted to control the narrative, he wouldn't have let me find his mother's letters about the Luna Protocol. He wouldn't have allowed me to attend alliance meetings. He wouldn't have given me access to documents that show his family's mistakes as well as their triumphs. Sarah's voice was passionate now, conviction bleeding through. He let me see everything because he believes in what his mother fought for: leadership through partnership, strength through honesty, progress through transparency. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled. You're exactly what he needs, you know. Sarah blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. Excuse me, Dominic Blackthorne. He's a good alpha, like you said. But he's been carrying everything alone for too long. It's made him rigid, overly controlled, isolated. Thorne closed the tablet, handing it back. You challenge that. Push him to be better. That's valuable. I'm not sure I understand what's happening right now. I'm telling you that I'm not your enemy, Ms. Montague. Or his. Thorne's expression turned serious. The council sent me to investigate, yes. But they also sent me because I'm a former alpha. I understand pack dynamics, territorial threats, and what it takes to keep people safe. I'm not here to crucify Blackthorn Pack for defending their allies. Then why the interrogation? Because the council has members who are threatened by strong, independent alphas, who prefer packs that defer to central authority rather than forming their own alliances and strategies. Thorne's voice dropped. And because Victor Strand has connections within the council. Political allies who are arguing that Blackthorn's alliance represents dangerous separatism. Sarah's stomach dropped. You think the council might side with Victor? I think politics is complicated, and truth doesn't always win. Thorne stood, pacing to the window. That's why I need to understand the full picture. Not just what happened during the Mountain Crest defense, but why. What Victor's really after. What his endgame is. You don't think this is just about territory? Victor Strand doesn't make moves without calculating every angle. This feels too coordinated, too escalated, too personal. Thorne turned back to Sarah. Which is why I'm asking, as someone who's been documenting this pack's history, do you have any insights into what Victor might want beyond territorial expansion? Sarah thought about the question, her historian's mind piecing together patterns. The old defense pact between Blackthorn and Bloodmoon, it was dissolved quietly, with no formal documentation. That suggests something happened that both packs wanted to hide. What kind of something? I don't know. The records just stop. Sarah pulled up her notes. But it was around the same time that Elizabeth Blackthorn was pushing the Luna Protocol. And shortly before she died. Thorne's expression sharpened. You think there's a connection? I think there are too many coincidences. The pact dissolving. The protocol being shut down. Elizabeth dying. And now, decades later, Victor targeting Blackthorn specifically. Sarah met the investigator's eyes. Maybe this isn't about territory at all. Maybe it's about settling an old score. That's speculation. That's historical analysis based on pattern recognition. Sarah wasn't backing down. And if I'm right, then the council needs to understand that this conflict has roots deeper than recent border disputes. Thorne considered this, her expression thoughtful. I'll need to see everything you have on that time period. Every document, every letter, every reference to the dissolved pact. I'll compile it for you. Sarah hesitated. Investigator, are you going to report my relationship with Dominic to the council? I'm going to report that the pack historian has demonstrated exceptional professional integrity despite personal involvement with pack leadership. Which is true. Thorne's smile was wry. What the council chooses to do with that information is their concern, not mine. It wasn't a promise of protection, but it was more than Sarah had hoped for. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This investigation is just beginning, and Victor's not going to make it easy. Thorne headed for the door, then paused. Ms. Montague, Sarah, off the record? Yes. Elizabeth Blackthorn's letters are remarkable. If you can convince Dominic to publish them, they could change pack culture across the continent. That kind of vision doesn't come along often. It would be a shame to let it stay buried. I'm working on it, Sarah said with a small smile. Thorne nodded approvingly. Good. The shifter world needs more people willing to challenge tradition when tradition stops serving us. Keep pushing. She left, and Sarah sat alone in the conference room, her mind racing through everything they'd discussed. The investigation was more complicated than she'd realized. Not just about the Mountain Crest defense, but about council politics, old grudges, and the future of pack governance. And somehow, she'd ended up in the middle of all of it. She found Dominic in his office 20 minutes later, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. He looked up when she entered, tension visible in every line of his body. How bad? He asked. Not as bad as you think. Maybe worse in different ways. Sarah closed the door and crossed to him, settling onto the edge of his desk. Thorne knows about us. She's not happy about the conflict of interest, but she's not out to crucify either of us. What does she want? The truth, which is actually in our favor. Sarah filled him in on the conversation, including Thorne's theory about Victor having council allies. Dominic's expression darkened. Of course he does. Victor's been playing political games for decades. He probably has half the council in his pocket, which means this investigation isn't just about determining facts. It's about managing optics and building a case strong enough that even Victor's allies can't ignore it. Sarah reached for his hand. Dominic, Thorne asked about the time period when the old defense pact dissolved. When your mother was fighting for the Luna Protocol. What about it? She thinks there might be a connection. That whatever caused the pact to dissolve might be related to why Victor's targeting you now. Sarah squeezed his hand. Is there anything from that time, anything your father might have mentioned or that you remember, that could explain what happened? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight with old tension. My father never talked about that time. Ever. When I asked, he'd shut down the conversation immediately. But you remember something. I remember my mother being upset. Angry at my father about something he'd done or agreed to. They fought, really fought, which was rare. Dominic's voice went distant with memory. I was maybe 10 or 11. I heard her say something about betraying everything we built, and choosing pride over partnership. When was this? A year, maybe 18 months before she died. He focused back on Sarah. You think that fight was about the pact dissolving? I think it might have been about something bigger. Something that involved both the pact and the Luna Protocol. Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing him the timeline she'd been building. Look, the protocol got its most serious consideration in 1983. Multiple alphas were debating it at council meetings. Then suddenly, in early 1984, all discussion stops. Your father withdraws his support. And within 6 months, the Blood Moon Defense Pact is quietly dissolved. You think my father made a deal? Dominic's voice was flat. Abandon my mother's protocol in exchange for something from Victor or the council. I think it's possible. And I think your mother never forgave him for it. Sarah's expression was gentle but honest, which might explain why he destroyed so much of her work after she died. Not just grief, but guilt. Dominic stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched into fists. My father was a good alpha. Strong, protective, devoted to the pack. I'm sure he was. Good people still make bad choices sometimes. If what you're suggesting is true, if he betrayed my mother's life work for political expedience, then everything I believed about his leadership was a lie. Dominic's voice was raw. Everything he taught me about honor and duty and putting pack first. Sarah went to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Or maybe it means he was complicated, human, caught between competing loyalties and making the choice he thought was right, even if it was wrong. That's generous. That's realistic. She rested her cheek against his back. None of us are heroes or villains, Dominic. We're just people trying to do our best with imperfect information and impossible choices. He turned in her embrace, pulling her close. What do we do with this theory? We can't prove any of it without more evidence. Then we find more evidence. Thorne's going to be here for several days conducting her investigation. That gives me time to dig deeper into the archives, reach out to other pack historians, maybe even contact some of the alphas who were involved in the Luna Protocol discussions back then. That's a lot of work. Good thing I'm thorough. She smiled up at him. Besides, if we can prove that Victor's current aggression is rooted in old grudges rather than legitimate territorial disputes, it strengthens our case significantly. Dominic cupped her face in his hands, marveling at how she'd gone from intriguing distraction to essential partner in just a few weeks. You're brilliant, you know that? I've been told. She rose on her toes to kiss him. Now, you need to go meet with Thorne again. She wants to interview Marcus and several of the fighters who were at Mountain Crest. Show her that your pack is professional, disciplined, and justified in their response. What will you be doing? Research. Deep diving into 1983 to 1984. Calling in favors from other historians. She grinned. The usual academic detective work. Be careful. If Victor has council allies, he might have intelligence networks too. I don't want you drawing attention that could put you in danger. I'm always careful. She kissed him again, then gently pushed him toward the door. Go. Be the impressive, authoritative alpha. I'll be the brilliant historian who makes you look even better. We're a good team. Yes, we are. The next 2 days were a blur of interviews, site visits, and documentation reviews. Thorne was thorough to the point of exhausting, interviewing every pack member who'd participated in the Mountain Crest defense, examining medical reports, even conducting her own assessment of the attack site. But she was also fair, Dominic realized. She asked hard questions, but she listened to the answers. She challenged assumptions, but she acknowledged evidence. And slowly, her preliminary conclusions began to take shape. Your response was proportionate, she told Dominic on the evening of her second day. Blood Moon initiated unprovoked aggression against an allied pack. You responded with appropriate force to repel the attack. The 4 fatalities occurred during active combat, not after surrender or retreat. So your report will reflect that? Dominic asked carefully. My report will reflect the facts, which include not just the Mountain Crest incident, but the pattern of Blood Moon aggression leading up to it. Thorne closed her laptop. Alpha Blackthorn, I'm recommending that the Council formally recognize your alliance pact and issue a cease and desist order against Victor Strand for territorial violations. Relief washed through Dominic, though he kept his expression controlled. Will the Council accept that recommendation? Most of them will. Some won't. Thorne's expression was grim. Victor has friends in high places. They'll argue that your alliance represents separatist tendencies, that you're building a power base independent of council authority, that you're the real threat to interpact stability. That's bullshit and they know it. Yes, but politics rarely cares about truth. Thorne stood, gathering her materials, which is why you need to be prepared for pushback. The council won't move quickly on this, and Victor will use that time to his advantage. Meaning he'll escalate. Push harder. Try to provoke a response that makes you look like the aggressor. Thorne met his eyes. Don't give him that satisfaction, Alpha. Stay defensive, stay justified, and let Victor dig his own grave. Easy to say. Harder to do when he's threatening my mate. I know, but it's necessary. Thorne paused at the door. For what it's worth, your father would be proud of how you've handled this. The alliance, the strategy, the leadership. You've exceeded his legacy. Dominic felt something tight and his chest loosened slightly. You knew my father? I met him several times at council gatherings. He was a good alpha. Traditional, stubborn, but genuinely devoted to his pack. Thorne's smile was sad. He also made mistakes. We all do. The question is whether we learn from them or repeat them. She left before Dominic could respond, but her words stayed with him. His father had made mistakes. The pact dissolution, the Luna Protocol betrayal, the choice to prioritize tradition over progress. But he'd also been a good alpha in many ways. Strong, protective, committed. Maybe both things could be true. Maybe that was what it meant to be human, or shifter, carrying both honor and failure in equal measure. Dominic found Sarah in their quarters, surrounded by papers and looking both exhausted and triumphant. I found something, she announced before he could even ask. Letters between your father and Victor's father, dated January 1984. She handed him photocopies of correspondence, and Dominic read with growing anger and understanding. His father had indeed made a deal. Victor's father had threatened to expose something. The letters didn't specify what, unless Thomas Blackthorne withdrew support for the Luna Protocol and agreed to dissolve the Defense Pact. Thomas had complied, believing he was protecting the pack from scandal. Elizabeth had never forgiven him. Your mother was right to be angry, Sarah said softly. He chose fear over principles, pride over partnership. He thought he was protecting us. Dominic set down the letters, his hands trembling slightly. But all he did was teach me the wrong lessons about leadership. No. Sarah took his hands, holding them steady. He taught you exactly the right lessons, by showing you what not to do. You've built an alliance based on mutual respect, not coercion. You've chosen transparency over secrets. You've found a partner who challenges you instead of submitting to you. Everything your mother wanted, you're creating. Because of you. Because of you, she corrected. I just helped you see what was already there. Dominic pulled her close, breathing in her scent, letting her presence ground him. What was Victor's father threatening to expose? That's the missing piece. The letters reference the matter we discussed, but never specify what it was. Sarah leaned back to look at him. But Dominic, whatever it was, it's been 40 years. The threat is probably meaningless now. Unless Victor knows what it was and is planning to use it. Dominic's jaw tightened. That could be his real leverage. Not just territorial aggression, but blackmail. Then we need to find out what the secret was before he can weaponize it. Sarah's expression turned determined. I'll reach out to council historians, see if there are any records from that time period that might give us clues. Be discreet. If Victor realizes we're digging into old history. I know. I'll be careful. She kissed him softly. We're going to figure this out, Dominic. Together. Together, he echoed, finally believing it. They worked late into the night, piecing together fragments of history, building a picture of the past that might explain the present. And for the first time since this crisis began, Dominic felt something like hope. Not because the threat was gone. Victor was still out there, still planning, still dangerous. But because he wasn't facing it alone anymore. He had a partner, an equal. Someone who saw his strengths and his weaknesses and chose to stand beside him anyway. Just like his mother had always wanted. Just like he'd always needed, even when he didn't know it. Margaret Thorne left the following morning, her preliminary report complete, and her recommendations submitted to the council. She shook Dominic's hand at the door, her expression grave, but not unsympathetic. Good luck, Alpha Blackthorne. You're going to need it. We'll be ready, Dominic replied. I believe you will. Thorne glanced at Sarah, who stood at Dominic's side. Take care of him, Ms. Montague. And make sure he publishes those letters. The world needs to hear Elizabeth Blackthorn's voice. I will, Sarah promised. They watched Thorn drive away, the morning sun painting the mountains in shades of gold and amber. A new day, a new phase of the conflict. But whatever came next, they'd face it together. As partners, as mates, as equals, ready for whatever comes next. Sarah asked, threading her fingers through his. Dominic looked down at her. This fierce, brilliant woman who'd stormed into his life and changed everything, and smiled. With you beside me? Always. Chapter 8. The council's response came 5 days after Thorn's departure, delivered via encrypted communication to all Alliance Alphas simultaneously. Dominic read it 3 times, his expression growing darker with each pass. They're calling a formal tribunal, he told the assembled Alliance leaders via video conference, to determine if our defensive actions were justified and whether our alliance pact violates Continental Accord provisions on independent militarization. That's bureaucratic bullshit, Cassandra Reeves snapped. They're giving Victor exactly what he wants, time and legitimacy. The tribunal is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, Marcus added, reading from the official notice. All Alliance Alphas are required to attend. In person, which means leaving our territories vulnerable, Juliana Torres observed grimly. Victor will know we're all gone. He could hit any of our packs while we're at council headquarters. That's the point, David Foster said. Force us to choose between defending our actions politically or defending our territories physically. Classic divide and conquer. Dominic studied the faces on his screens. Alphas he'd come to trust over the last few weeks, leaders who'd stood with him when it mattered. They were worried, and rightfully so. We don't leave our territories undefended, he said firmly. Each pack designates a strong beta or second to maintain command during our absence. We coordinate our security protocols so that an attack on any territory triggers immediate response from the nearest allied packs. And we make it very clear to Victor that attacking while we're at tribunal will only strengthen our case. You think he cares about strengthening our case? Marcus Webb asked skeptically. I think he cares about winning. And if he attacks during tribunal, he looks like exactly what we've been saying he is, an aggressor hiding behind political connections. Dominic leaned forward. We go to this tribunal united, prepared, and confident. We present our evidence, we defend our actions, and we trust that truth and justice matter, even in council politics. And if they don't, Robertson asked quietly, then we deal with that outcome when it comes. Dominic's voice carried absolute certainty. But I won't let fear of political consequences stop us from doing what's right. We defended our allies. We protected our people. We acted with honor and restraint. That's the truth, and that's what we're taking to the council. One by one, the Alphas nodded their agreement. The alliance would hold, even in the face of council scrutiny. After the call ended, Sarah emerged from where she'd been working in the corner of the office. That was a good speech. Very inspirational alpha energy. I meant every word. Dominic pulled her onto his lap, needing her closeness. But I'm worried, Sarah. 3 weeks is a long time. Victor could do a lot of damage. So we make sure he doesn't get the chance. She traced patterns on his chest absently. I've been thinking about what we discussed, the old secret that Victor's father used for blackmail. What if we figure out what it was and neutralize it before the tribunal? How? It's been 40 years. Whatever it was might be impossible to uncover now. Maybe. Or maybe we're not looking in the right place. Sarah pulled out her tablet, showing him a list of names. These are the Alphas who were most vocal in supporting the Luna Protocol. 3 of them are still alive. I want to interview them, see if they remember what caused your father to suddenly withdraw his support. That's a risk. If word gets back to Victor that we're investigating, then we'll deal with it. But Dominic, we need every advantage we can get before that tribunal. If we can prove that Victor's father used blackmail and coercion to destroy a progressive alliance 40 years ago, and that Victor's doing the same thing now, it changes the entire narrative. She was right. Dominic hated that she was right, hated that it meant putting her in potential danger. But she was absolutely right. Fine. But you don't go alone. Marcus or I go with you for every interview. Deal. She kissed him softly. Now about the letters. Elizabeth's letters. Thorn was right. They need to be published. Sarah, I know you're scared of what your father's legacy will look like. But your mother deserves to have her voice heard. Her vision shared. She fought for something important, And that shouldn't stay buried just because your father made bad choices. Sarah's eyes blazed with conviction. Let me compile them into a proper manuscript. Anonymous publication if you want. But Dominic, let her speak. He thought about his mother's words, preserved across decades. Her wisdom, her passion, her revolutionary ideas about partnership and power. She'd died thinking she'd failed, that her work meant nothing. Maybe it was time to prove her wrong. Okay, he said finally. Publish them. But not anonymous. Use her name. Elizabeth Blackthorne deserves credit for her vision. Sarah's smile was radiant. Thank you. She would be so proud of you. I hope so. Dominic stood, lifting her with him. Now we have work to do. 3 interviews to arrange, a tribunal to prepare for, and a pact to keep safe. Ready. Always. The first interview was with Alpha Patricia Morgan, who'd led the Riverbend Pack in Oregon during the Luna Protocol debates. She was in her 80s now, retired from active leadership, but still sharp-minded and opinionated. She received Dominic and Sarah in her comfortable home on the Oregon coast, tea and cookies already prepared, her weathered face lighting up when Dominic introduced himself. You look just like your mother, Patricia said, studying him with shrewd eyes. Same jaw, same intensity. Thomas's coloring, but Elizabeth's spirit. You knew her well? Sarah asked, her recorder running. As well as anyone, I suppose. We weren't close friends, but we were allies in the protocol fight. Both of us believed that packs were stronger with balanced leadership. Patricia poured tea with steady hands. Your mother was brilliant, Dominic. Persuasive, passionate, unafraid to challenge centuries of tradition. She almost succeeded, almost convinced enough alphas that the protocol would have passed. What stopped it? Dominic asked. Patricia's expression clouded. Your father withdrew his support. Suddenly, without explanation. And once Blackthorne Pack pulled out, others followed. We didn't have the votes anymore. Do you know why he withdrew? Officially? He said he'd reconsidered and decided tradition served us better than change. Patricia's tone made clear what she thought of that explanation. Unofficially? Rumors suggested Victor Strand's father had something on Thomas. Blackmail of some kind. What kind of something? Sarah leaned forward. No one knew for certain. But there were whispers about a scandal from before Thomas became Alpha. Something that happened during the transition of power from his father. Patricia sipped her tea thoughtfully. Your grandfather died young, Dominic. Barely 60. There were questions about the circumstances. Dominic went very still. What kind of questions? The official story was a hunting accident. A rogue bear, wrong place, wrong time. But some people wondered if it was really that simple. Patricia met his eyes steadily. I'm not saying anything definitive happened. Just that there were questions. And questions can be enough for blackmail, even without proof. Sarah was taking notes rapidly. Who would have known the truth? Victor's father, apparently. He was there at the scene. One of the first responders. Patricia's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry, Dominic. This can't be easy to hear about your family. Truth rarely is. Dominic's voice was controlled, but Sarah could feel the tension radiating from him. Did my mother know about these questions? I think so. She mentioned once, near the end of the protocol fight, that Thomas was protecting old ghosts instead of building a better future. That's not a direct answer, but... Patricia shrugged. Make of it what you will. They talked for another hour, Patricia sharing memories of Elizabeth and the protocol movement with obvious affection and lingering regret. By the time they left, Sarah had hours of recorded material and a much clearer picture of what had destroyed the Luna Protocol. Dominic was silent during the drive back to Blackthorne territory, his jaw tight and his hands gripping the steering wheel with unnecessary force. Talk to me, Sarah said finally. My grandfather's death wasn't an accident. The words came out flat, emotionless. That's what Victor's father knew. What he used to blackmail my father into destroying my mother's work. We don't know that for certain. Patricia said there were questions, not proof. Why else would my father cave to blackmail? Why else would he betray everything my mother fought for? Dominic's knuckles were white on the wheel. He was protecting the family reputation, making sure no one questioned how he became Alpha. Or protecting you, Sarah suggested gently. If there was scandal about how your grandfather died, it wouldn't just affect your father. It would affect you too. Your legitimacy as Alpha could have been challenged. Dominic pulled over to the side of the road, unable to drive and process this revelation simultaneously. My entire leadership is built on a lie. No, Sarah took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Your leadership is built on 10 years of serving your pack honorably. Whatever happened 40 years ago doesn't change who you are now, what you've accomplished, how your people see you. It changes everything. If Victor knows, if he can prove, then we find proof first. We control the narrative instead of letting him weaponize it. Her voice was fierce. Dominic, you are not your father. You're not your grandfather. You're the alpha who chose transparency over secrets, partnership over domination, truth over tradition. That's your legacy, not whatever might have happened 4 decades ago. He wanted to believe her, wanted to accept that the past didn't define him, that his own actions mattered more than ancestral mistakes. But the weight of potential scandal felt crushing. We need to talk to the other 2 alphas, he said finally. Get their perspectives. See if anyone knows more details about my grandfather's death. Agreed. But Dominic, breathe first. Process this. Don't let Victor's potential blackmail destroy you before he even uses it. He pulled her close, breathing in her wildflower scent, letting her steady presence anchor him. I don't know what I'd do without you. Lucky for you, you'll never have to find out. She kissed him softly. We're in this together. Whatever comes. Whatever comes, he echoed. The second interview was with Alpha James Mitchell in Idaho, who'd been a young alpha during the protocol debates, but enthusiastic about the changes Elizabeth proposed. He was less helpful than Patricia. He remembered the discussions but hadn't been privy to the behind-the-scenes politics that killed the initiative. But the third interview, with retired Alpha Catherine Winters in Montana, proved illuminating in unexpected ways. Catherine was 93, sharp as a tack, and completely uninterested in diplomatic niceties. You want to know about Thomas Blackthorne's shame? She said bluntly, after Dominic explained why they'd come. Fine. I'll tell you, but you're not going to like it. I'm prepared for that, Dominic said. Your grandfather, Robert Blackthorne, was challenged for pack leadership by his own beta, a man named Daniel Crawford. It was a legitimate challenge under pack law. Crawford claimed Robert had become too old, too slow, unable to defend the territory adequately. Catherine's eyes were distant with memory. The challenge fight was scheduled for a full moon in October 1958. Your father was supposed to witness it as heir apparent. What happened? Sarah asked. Robert died 3 days before the challenge fight. Hunting accident. Catherine's tone dripped skepticism. Very convenient timing. Meant your father inherited without having to watch his father potentially lose. Or worse, win but be permanently injured. You think my father killed his own father? Dominic's voice was dangerous. I think accidents happen. I also think your father was a devoted son who would have done anything to spare Robert the humiliation of losing a challenge fight in front of the pack. Catherine met Dominic's eyes without flinching. And I think Victor Strand's father was there. Saw something. Maybe proof, maybe just suspicion. But enough to use as leverage decades later. Why didn't Crawford contest the inheritance? He tried. But without Robert's body, it was never recovered, claimed the bear dragged it off. There was no way to prove anything other than tragic accident. Eventually, Crawford backed down. Catherine's expression was grim. But the questions never fully went away. Some pack members always wondered. Dominic stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Sarah could see him struggling to reconcile this version of his father with the man he'd known. Stern, traditional, but honorable. If this is true, if my father did kill his own father to spare him humiliation, then my entire inheritance is built on murder. Or mercy killing, Catherine said quietly. If Robert was truly failing, if he would have lost that challenge fight badly, if Crawford would have been a terrible alpha, then maybe your father made an impossible choice for the pack's good. That doesn't make it right. No, but it makes it complicated, which is what life usually is. Catherine stood slowly, her joints creaking. Dominic, I knew your father. He wasn't a murderer. He was a man caught between impossible loyalties, to his father, to his pack, to tradition. Whatever happened that day in the woods, he lived with the weight of it his whole life. It shaped every decision he made, including betraying my mother's work. Including that, he thought he was protecting you, protecting the pack, ensuring your inheritance wouldn't be challenged. Catherine's voice gentled. He was wrong, but he wasn't evil, just human, flawed, doing what he thought was necessary. Sarah moved to Dominic's side, taking his hand. We should go. We have a lot to process. They thanked Catherine and drove back in heavy silence. The pieces were coming together now. A picture of family secrets and difficult choices, of blackmail and betrayal spanning decades. And Victor knew all of it, was planning to use it. "We're walking into that tribunal with this hanging over us," Dominic said as they reached Blackthorn territory. "Victor's going to drop this bomb at the worst possible moment, destroy my credibility, shatter the alliance. Not if we drop it first." Sarah's voice was thoughtful. "What if we don't wait for Victor to reveal the secret? What if you tell the truth yourself, on your terms? Confess to something my father might have done. Acknowledge that there are questions about your family's past, that you've investigated them honestly. That whatever happened 40 years ago doesn't change your commitment to transparent, honorable leadership now." She turned to face him. "Victor's weapon only works if you're hiding from it. If you face it head-on, acknowledge the complicated truth, and demonstrate that you're not your father, you take away his power." It was terrifying. It was risky. It was exactly what his mother would have wanted him to do. "You really think that would work?" "I think hiding never works. And I think your pack, your alliance, will respect honesty more than perfection." Sarah squeezed his hand. "You're not just fighting for your reputation, Dominic. You're fighting for a vision of leadership based on truth and partnership. This is your chance to prove you mean it." He pulled her into his arms, marveling at her courage and wisdom. "When did you get so brave?" "I've always been brave. You're just finally noticing." She smiled against his chest. "So what do? We prepare. We document everything we've learned. We build a narrative that's honest about the past while focusing on the future." Dominic's voice grew stronger, more certain. "And we trust that truth and transparency are better weapons than secrets and shame." "That's my alpha," Sarah murmured. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Dominic worked with Sarah to compile everything they'd learned about his family's past, creating a comprehensive document that acknowledged the questions while refusing to speculate beyond available evidence. He also finally read through all of his mother's letters, absorbing her vision for pack leadership with new understanding. She'd known about the questions surrounding his grandfather's death. She'd known his father was haunted by whatever had happened. And she'd still fought for change, still believed in partnership and transparency, still dreamed of a better way. Now Dominic would honor that dream. 3 days before the tribunal, he called a full pack meeting. Every adult member gathered in the great hall to hear their alpha speak. "I need to tell you something about our family's history," Dominic began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Something that's complicated and painful, but that you deserve to know." He told them everything. The questions about his grandfather's death, the blackmail that destroyed the Luna Protocol, his father's impossible choices and lasting shame, the family secrets that Victor Strand planned to weaponize. "I'm telling you this now because I believe in transparency," Dominic said. "Because I won't be blackmailed into silence about our past. Because you deserve an alpha who trusts you with truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable." The pack was silent, absorbing this revelation. Then Marcus stood. "Whatever happened 40 years ago, it doesn't change who you are now. It doesn't change that you've been the best alpha this pack has seen in generations." His voice rang with conviction. "And it sure as hell doesn't change that we trust you, follow you, and stand with you." One by one, other pack members rose, voicing their support. By the time the meeting ended, Dominic's eyes were damp and his throat was tight with emotion. His pack knew the worst about his family's past, and they stood with him anyway. That night, wrapped in Sarah's arms, Dominic finally felt the weight of secrets lift from his shoulders. "Ready for the tribunal?" she asked. "Ready to face whatever comes. With truth. With my pack. With you." He kissed her forehead. "Ready to finish what my mother started. Then let's go change the world, Alpha." Chapter 9. The Continental Pack Council headquarters in Colorado was an imposing structure. Equal parts government building and fortress, designed to remind visiting alphas that council authority superseded individual pack power. Dominic had been here twice before, both times for routine territorial certifications. This time felt entirely different. This time he was on trial. The 7 Alliance alphas arrived together, a deliberate show of unity that made heads turn as they entered the main hall. Dominic led the group, with Sarah at his side, not hidden away or relegated to observer status, but standing beside him as an equal. As his mate, that alone was making waves. He could feel the stares, hear the whispered conversations about the human woman walking with the alpha contingent like she belonged there. She did belong there. And Dominic was done pretending otherwise. Marcus had remained at Blackthorn territory, commanding the pack in Dominic's absence along with Elena and the rest of the council. They were prepared for potential attacks, coordinated with the other Alliance betas to provide rapid response if needed. It was the best they could do. Now came the political battle. The tribunal chamber was arranged in a semicircle, with 12 council members seated on an elevated platform facing a central floor where the accused, Dominic couldn't help thinking of himself that way, would present their case. Gallery seating rose in tiers behind, already filling with observers, other alphas, pack representatives, and political operatives. And there, in the front row of the gallery, sat Victor Strand. He was exactly as Dominic had pictured, mid-60s, powerfully built despite his age, with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes that assessed everything with predatory calculation. He wore an expensive suit that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than civilized, and his smile when he caught Dominic's gaze was pure malice. "That's him," Sarah murmured, following Dominic's line of sight. "That's him." Dominic forced himself to look away, to not give Victor the satisfaction of seeing any reaction. "Stay close during the proceedings. I don't trust him. I'll be fine." But she moved closer anyway, her hand finding his briefly. "You've got this." The council members filed in, 12 alphas and former alphas, representing different regions and political factions. Dominic recognized most of them by reputation. Some were fair-minded. Others were firmly in Victor's pocket, based on the intelligence his alliance had gathered. And at the center sat council chair Helena Vasquez, a formidable 70-year-old former alpha from New Mexico, known for her sharp mind and intolerance for bullshit. She was the swing vote, the one they needed to convince. "This tribunal is now in session," Helena announced, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. "We are here to examine the events surrounding the formation of the Northern Alliance Pact and the subsequent defensive action at Mountain Crest territory. Alpha Dominic Blackthorn of the Blackthorn Pack will present first. Alpha Victor Strand of the Blood Moon Pack will respond. Then we will hear from other affected parties." Helena's gaze swept the chamber. "I remind everyone present that this tribunal operates under oath. Dishonesty or deliberate misrepresentation of facts will result in immediate sanctions. Are we clear?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. "Alpha Blackthorn, you may begin." Dominic stepped to the center of the floor, acutely aware of every eye watching him. This was it, the moment where everything they'd prepared, everything they'd discovered, everything his mother had fought for, it all came down to this. "Honorable council members," he began, his voice steady and strong, "I stand before you today not to defend violence, but to defend the fundamental right of packs to protect themselves and their allies from unprovoked aggression." He activated the presentation Marcus had prepared, displaying the timeline of Blood Moon incursions across multiple territories. Marked kills, border violations, coordinated provocations. For 6 weeks prior to the Mountain Crest attack, Blood Moon Pack systematically tested the defenses of 7 allied packs. These weren't random encounters or accidents. They were calculated acts of aggression designed to probe for weakness, to intimidate, and to divide. He clicked through documented incidents, each one supported by patrol reports, photographs, and witness statements. When these provocations escalated to a direct attack on Mountain Crest territory, 20 Blood Moon wolves crossing into Allied lands, attacking patrol units, and threatening the pack house itself, we responded. Not with excessive force, not with revenge, but with appropriate defensive action to repel the aggressors and protect our ally. Dominic pulled up the casualty report. 4 Blood Moon wolves died during that engagement. All 4 deaths occurred during active combat, not after surrender or retreat. All 4 chose to continue fighting rather than withdraw when given the opportunity. Their deaths are tragic, but they are the direct consequence of their own aggressive choices. He paused, letting that sink in. The Northern Alliance Pact was formed in direct response to these coordinated threats. 7 packs, recognizing a pattern of aggression against our territories, chose to stand together rather than be picked off individually. We notified the Council within the required time frame. We operated within the bounds of Continental Accord law, and we acted to preserve pack safety and territorial integrity, which is exactly what alphas are supposed to do. "Thank you, Alpha Blackthorn," Helena said. "Council members may now ask questions." A gray-haired alpha from the Eastern Territories, one of Victor's known allies, leaned forward. "Alpha Blackthorn, Isn't it true that you formed this alliance without council consultation? That you deliberately bypassed diplomatic channels in favor of military response? We formed a defensive alliance using procedures outlined in the Continental Accord, Dominic replied calmly. The same procedures used by dozens of other pack alliances over the last century. We notified the Council within 48 hours as required. There was no consultation requirement for defensive pacts between sovereign territories. But your pact includes provisions for coordinated military action. Our pact includes provisions for mutual defense, which is the entire point of an alliance. Dominic's voice hardened slightly. Would you suggest we should have let Mountain Crest fall while we waited for council permission to defend our allies? The Alpha subsided, clearly not expecting such direct pushback. Another council member, a middle-aged woman from California, spoke next. Alpha Blackthorn, you've presented evidence of blood moon provocations. But isn't it possible these were simply territorial disputes being handled through traditional methods? Marked kills, border testing, these are common practices. Common practices between packs in active negotiation, yes, Dominic agreed. But there were no negotiations, no communication, no diplomatic overtures of any kind. Just coordinated aggression designed to destabilize our alliance network. He pulled up another document, the one that would either vindicate him or destroy him. Which brings me to historical context that's relevant to these proceedings. The chamber went quiet. Victor sat forward in his seat, his expression sharpening with interest. 40 years ago, Blackthorn and Blood Moon pacts maintained a mutual defense pact similar to our current alliance structure. That pact was dissolved quietly in 1984, with no formal documentation or legal termination. I've recently discovered correspondence suggesting that dissolution was not mutual, but coerced. Dominic displayed copies of the letters between his father and Victor's father, the blackmail implicit in every line. Victor Strand's father used information, or alleged information, about my family's past to force my father to withdraw support for a progressive initiative called the Luna Protocol and to dissolve the Standing Defense Pact. My father complied, believing he was protecting pack interests. In reality, he was submitting to extortion. The chamber erupted in whispers. Victor's expression went from interested to furious. I bring this up not to litigate 40-year-old conflicts, but to establish pattern. Victor Strand is using his father's playbook, blackmail, coercion, coordinated aggression, all designed to divide and weaken potential opposition to Blood Moon expansion. Dominic's voice rang with conviction. The Northern Alliance Pact isn't about military aggression or separatism. It's about pacts refusing to be bullied, intimidated, or blackmailed into submission. This is outrageous. Victor was on his feet, his alpha presence filling the chamber. You accuse my father of blackmail without proof, you slander my pack's reputation, and you have the audacity to claim victim status while building an unauthorized military coalition. Sit down, Alpha Strand, Helena commanded. You'll have your turn to speak. Victor sat, but his eyes promised murder. Helena turned back to Dominic. These are serious allegations, Alpha Blackthorn. Do you have evidence beyond 40-year-old correspondence that could be interpreted multiple ways? I have pattern of behavior. I have documented aggression. And I have this. Dominic played his final card. Pulling up the manuscript Sarah had compiled of his mother's letters, her vision for the Luna Protocol, and the testimony from Patricia, James, and Catherine about what happened when that vision was destroyed. My mother, Elizabeth Blackthorn, dedicated years of her life to advancing a vision of pack leadership based on partnership, transparency, and shared authority. The Luna Protocol would have changed how alphas govern, how power is distributed, how mates and partners are respected within pack hierarchy. It would have made us stronger, more resilient, more just. He looked directly at Helena Vasquez, at the council members he knew were fair-minded, at the gallery full of alphas watching this unfold. Victor Strand's father helped destroy that vision through blackmail and political manipulation. And now Victor is attempting to destroy any alliance that might challenge Blood Moon dominance through violence and intimidation. The question before this tribunal isn't whether we defended Mountain Crest appropriately. The evidence clearly shows we did. The question is whether the council will allow history to repeat itself, whether you'll let blackmail and aggression succeed again, or whether you'll finally stand for the principles my mother fought for 4 decades ago. Dominic stepped back. I have nothing more to add. Our actions were justified. Our alliance is legal. and our commitment to defending our territories and our vision of leadership is absolute. The silence in the chamber was profound. Then Helena nodded slowly. Thank you, Alpha Blackthorn. Alpha Strand, you may present your response. Victor rose with the grace of a predator, his smile cold and calculating. Council members, you've just witnessed a masterful example of manipulation. Alpha Blackthorn has taken legitimate territorial management by my pack and spun it into some grand conspiracy theory. He's dredged up ancient history, made unsubstantiated claims about my deceased father, and wrapped it all in emotional appeals about his mother's failed political initiative. He activated his own presentation, showing maps of the territories in question. The marked kills Alpha Blackthorn described? Standard boundary maintenance. The border crossings? Routine patrol overlaps in disputed buffer zones. The Mountain Crest incident? A defensive response to an alliance military force that appeared to be massing for offensive action. That's a lie, Cassandra Reeves called out from the alliance section. We have drone footage showing your wolves attacking first. Footage can be edited, Victor said smoothly. Narratives can be constructed. But the fundamental truth remains. Alpha Blackthorn formed an unauthorized military alliance in response to my pack's legitimate territorial management, then used that alliance to justify lethal force against Blood Moon wolves who were simply defending themselves. He turned to face Dominic directly, and his smile widened. As for these allegations about my father and blackmail, I find it fascinating that Alpha Blackthorn brings up his family's past. Shall we discuss what really happened to Robert Blackthorn in October 1958? Shall we examine the very convenient hunting accident that allowed Thomas Blackthorn to inherit without facing a legitimate leadership challenge? The chamber exploded in noise. Victor had done exactly what they'd anticipated, weaponized the family secret. But Dominic was ready. Yes, he said clearly, cutting through the chaos. Let's discuss it. The noise died as everyone turned to stare at him. My grandfather's death is surrounded by questions. I've investigated those questions honestly and thoroughly. I don't know with certainty what happened that day in the woods. Neither does Victor, despite his implications. What I do know is that questions about the past don't invalidate actions in the present. Dominic's voice rang with absolute conviction. I've told my pack the truth about our complicated history. I've acknowledged the mistakes and difficult choices made by previous alphas. And I've committed myself to leading differently, with transparency, with partnership, with honesty even when it's uncomfortable. He gestured to Sarah, who stood and joined him on the chamber floor. This is Sarah Montague, my mate and partner. She's human. She's the council's appointed historian. And she's spent the last 2 months documenting every aspect of Blackthorn Pack operations with complete transparency. That documentation is available to this tribunal, to the council, to anyone who wants to verify that I'm not hiding from truth. I'm embracing it. Sarah pulled up her comprehensive files on the chamber displays. Thousands of pages of records, reports, analysis, and historical documentation. My mother believed that packs were strongest when led by partners, not dictators. When built on truth, not secrets. When committed to justice, not just power. Dominic's gaze swept the council members. I'm proving she was right. Our alliance is stronger because it's built on mutual respect and honest communication. Our defensive response was appropriate because it was measured, justified, and transparent. And our vision for pack leadership is the future, whether Victor Strand and his old guard allies like it or not. He turned to Victor, meeting those cold blue eyes without flinching. You tried to destroy my mother's work 40 years ago through your father's blackmail. You're trying to destroy mine now through violence and political manipulation. But you're going to fail, Victor. Because truth and transparency are stronger weapons than secrets and shame. And because this time, I'm not standing alone. The Alliance Alphas rose as one. A unified show of support that resonated through the chamber. Victor's expression was murderous, but before he could respond, Helena Vasquez rapped her gavel. This tribunal will recess for deliberation. All parties will reconvene in 2 hours for the council's decision. The 2-hour wait was excruciating. The Alliance Alphas gathered in a private conference room, the tension palpable as they dissected every moment of the tribunal proceedings. You took a huge risk bringing up your family's past like that, David Foster said, though his tone was more impressed than critical. But it worked. You controlled the narrative instead of letting Victor weaponize it. Sarah's strategy, Dominic said, pulling her close. Face the truth head-on instead of hiding from it. The question is whether the council will see it that way, Juliana Torres observed. Victor has allies up there. They might use the family scandal as justification to rule against us regardless of the facts. Then we deal with that outcome, Cassandra said firmly. But we presented a strong case. The evidence is overwhelming. They'd have to be completely corrupt to rule in Victor's favor. Politics doesn't always care about evidence, Robertson said quietly. Sometimes it cares about power dynamics and maintaining the status quo. They all knew he was right. The next hour crawled by with agonizing slowness. Finally, a council aide appeared to summon them back to the tribunal chamber. The gallery was even more packed than before, word having spread about the explosive revelations during testimony. Dominic could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes as he took his position on the chamber floor. Helena Vasquez looked tired but resolute as she called the proceedings to order. The council has deliberated on the evidence and testimony presented. This was not an easy decision. The issues raised today touch on fundamental questions about PAC's sovereignty, defensive rights, and the balance between central authority and territorial autonomy. She paused, and Dominic felt Sarah's hand slip into his, squeezing tight. However, after careful consideration, the council finds as follows. First, the Northern Alliance Pact was formed in accordance with Continental Accord procedures and is therefore legally valid. Second, the defensive response at Mountain Crest territory was proportionate and justified given the documented pattern of Blood Moon aggression. Third, the 4 Blood Moon casualties occurred during active combat and do not constitute excessive force. Relief washed through Dominic, but Helena wasn't finished. Furthermore, the council notes with concern the pattern of coercive behavior described in testimony regarding events from 40 years ago. While we cannot adjudicate those historical events, we can address current behavior. Therefore, the council issues a formal censure against Blood Moon PAC for territorial violations and orders immediate cessation of all border provocations against Northern Alliance territories. Victor was on his feet instantly. This is political bias. We're siding with evidence and law, Alpha Strand, which you would do well to remember. Helena's voice could have cut steel. The council also orders both parties to enter into mediated territorial negotiations within 30 days to resolve any legitimate boundary disputes through diplomatic channels. She looked between Dominic and Victor, her expression stern. Let me be absolutely clear. Further violence between these parties will result in severe sanctions, up to and including territorial forfeiture and loss of council recognition. This conflict ends now, through negotiation and compromise, or it ends with consequences neither of you will enjoy. Am I understood? Yes, Council Chair, Dominic said immediately. Victor took longer, his jaw working with barely suppressed rage. Yes, Council Chair. Good. This tribunal is adjourned. The gavel fell, and the chamber erupted in noise. Some celebrating, some protesting, everyone talking at once. Dominic pulled Sarah into his arms, relief and triumph flooding through him. We won. You won, she corrected, her smile radiant. You faced down your demons, told the truth, and proved your mother's vision right. The Alliance Alphas surrounded them, offering congratulations and relief. They'd done it, against political pressure and old guard resistance. They'd proven that transparency and partnership were viable alternatives to traditional PAC hierarchy. But as they celebrated, Dominic caught Victor's gaze across the chamber. The older Alpha's expression promised that this wasn't over. That council censure or not, he wasn't done. And Dominic believed him. But for now, they'd won the battle that mattered. The alliance was validated. Their defensive actions were justified. And the vision Elizabeth Blackthorne had fought for 4 decades ago was finally being recognized. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Chapter 10. The celebration in the Alliance's hotel suite was subdued. Everyone understood that while they'd won the tribunal, the larger conflict with Victor remained unresolved. Dominic stood by the window, watching the Denver skyline glitter against the night, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Mediated territorial negotiations. 30 days. Victor would use that time to his advantage somehow. The question was how. You're brooding, Sarah said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of whiskey. We just won a major victory. You're allowed to enjoy it for at least an hour before the strategic planning kicks in. I can't shake the feeling that Victor's planning something. Dominic accepted the glass, sipping the smooth liquor. He was too calm at the end. Too controlled. That's not like him. Maybe he finally realized he can't win through aggression and intimidation. But Sarah didn't sound convinced either. Marcus's voice came through Dominic's phone before he could respond. A video call that made Dominic's wolf surge with alarm before he even answered. His beta only called during celebrations if something was seriously wrong. "Dom, we have a situation." Marcus's face was grim on the screen. "Blood Moon wolves just hit our eastern border. Not a probe, a full assault. At least 40 wolves, coordinated attack patterns, and they're pushing hard toward the manor." Ice shot through Dominic's veins. "When?" "Started 15 minutes ago. We're holding the perimeter, but Dom, they brought explosives. They're trying to breach the reinforced sections." Explosives. Victor had escalated beyond anything they'd anticipated. Casualties. Dominic was already moving, the other alphas converging on him as they sensed the crisis. 3 injured, none critical yet. But if they break through, Marcus didn't need to finish. If Blood Moon wolves reached the manor, the pack house where families sheltered, where pups slept. "I'm coming. Hold them off for 3 hours. That's how long it'll take me to get there." Dominic's mind raced through logistics. Activate the emergency protocols. Get all non-combatants to the safe rooms. And Marcus, use lethal force. Victor just violated the council's cease and desist order. He's made his choice. Copy that. Dom, be careful. This feels like a trap. The call ended. Dominic turned to find all 6 Alliance alphas watching him, their expressions ranging from fury to calculation. "Victor attacked during the celebration," Cassandra said, understanding immediately. "He knew we'd all be here, away from our territories. This is his real play. Humiliate us at tribunal, then strike while we're scattered." "My territory's closest," Juliana said, already pulling out her phone. "I can have reinforcements at your border in 90 minutes. "Mine too," Robert added. "I'm mobilizing now." "Everyone mobilize," Dominic commanded, his alpha presence filling the room. "Victor's making his final move. We end this tonight, together, exactly like we promised we would." Within 10 minutes, the Alliance alphas had coordinated their response. Pack members were being mobilized across 4 states. Vehicles were racing toward Blackthorn territory, and emergency communications were lighting up the territorial networks. Dominic and Sarah were in his truck 5 minutes later, pushing speed limits as they raced north toward Montana. The 3-hour drive felt endless, every minute stretching like hours as updates came through from Marcus. "They're using military-grade equipment," Marcus reported an hour into the drive. "Shaped charges, tactical coordination, night vision gear. This isn't pack warfare, this is something else." "Victor's been planning this for months," Sarah said quietly. "Maybe years. The provocations, the tribunal, all of it was building to this moment. Then he's about to learn what happens when you threaten everything I love." Dominic's voice was deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded violence. Sarah's hand found his on the gear shift. "We're going to stop him. All of us together." "I know. But Sarah, when we get there, I need you to stay in the command center with Elena and the others. Not on the front lines. Dominic, please." He glanced at her, letting her see the fear beneath his alpha control. "I can't fight effectively if I'm worried about protecting you. Let me know you're safe, so I can do what needs to be done." She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but you'd better come back to me in one piece, or I'm going to be very angry." "Deal." They pushed harder, the truck eating up miles of highway as darkness deepened around them. Other vehicles joined them on the road, Alliance pack members converging from different directions, all racing toward the same crisis. 2 hours into the drive, Marcus called again. They breached the eastern perimeter. "We're falling back to secondary defensive positions around the manor." His voice was tight with strain. "Dom, they're not trying to hold territory. They're pushing straight for the pack house. This is a decapitation strike. They want to destroy Blackthorn's heart. How long can you hold?" 30 minutes, maybe 40. "We've got the safe rooms locked down, but if they break through..." Marcus didn't finish. He didn't need to. "I'll be there in 45 minutes. Hold them, Marcus. Whatever it takes. We will. Just get here." Dominic pushed the truck even faster, the engine roaring as they flew through the darkness. Beside him, Sarah was silent, her hands clenched in her lap, her face pale but determined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached Blackthorn territory. The eastern sky glowed orange, fires burning where the battle raged. The sound of combat echoed through the forest, snarls, howls, the crack of explosives. Dominic drove straight for the manor, parking in the reinforced garage and turning to Sarah. Command center. Now. Stay there until I come for you. Be careful. She kissed him hard and fast. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her back, then forced himself to pull away. Go. She went, and Dominic stripped off his clothes, letting his wolf surge forward. The shift was instant, painless. 10 years of practice making the transformation as natural as breathing. Then he ran toward the sound of battle, his pack following close behind. The scene was chaos. Blood Moon wolves had pushed through the eastern defenses and were now fighting in the grounds surrounding the manor. Blackthorn wolves were holding them back through sheer determination, but they were outnumbered and exhausted. Dominic hit the battle line like a freight train. He was massive in wolf form, alpha-sized, steel gray, and absolutely lethal. He took down the first Blood Moon wolf with a single strike, his jaws crushing bone. The second wolf tried to flank him and died for it. The third actually managed to land a hit before Dominic tore out its throat. His pack rallied around him, their alpha's presence giving them renewed strength. The tide began to turn. But Victor wasn't done. A massive black wolf emerged from the trees. Bigger than any of the others, radiating alpha power that made even Dominic's wolf take notice. Victor Strand in his true form, finally revealing himself on the battlefield. Their eyes met across the killing ground, and Dominic understood with perfect clarity what Victor wanted. Not just territory, not just victory. Single combat. Alpha against alpha. The old way. Dominic shifted back to human form, and Victor did the same. They stood facing each other across 20 feet of bloodied ground, both naked and magnificent in their power, while the battle raged around them. You should have stayed quiet, boy, Victor said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. Should have accepted my dominance and lived. Instead, you chose this. I chose to stand for something my mother believed in. Something you helped destroy. Dominic's voice was steel. You're a relic, Victor. A remnant of the old ways that don't serve us anymore. And tonight that ends. Big words from an alpha whose pack is about to fall. Victor smiled, cold and cruel. Even if you kill me, my wolves will destroy this place. Your legacy will be ash and blood. Look around. Dominic gestured to the battle lines, where fresh wolves were pouring in, Cascade Pack from the west, Silver Lake from the north, Granite Peak from the south. Your wolves are surrounded. My alliance came, just like I knew they would. You're not fighting one pack anymore, Victor. You're fighting 7, and you're losing. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Victor's face as he saw the reality of the situation. Blood Moon wolves were being pushed back on all sides, overwhelmed by the coordinated alliance response. This isn't over, Victor snarled. Yes, Dominic said quietly. It is. He shifted and attacked in one fluid motion, giving Victor no time to prepare. They collided with bone-shattering force, 2 alpha wolves fighting with decades of grievance and rage fueling every strike. Victor was older, more experienced, with a lifetime of battles behind him. But Dominic was younger, faster, and fighting for something more than pride or power. He was fighting for his mother's vision, for his pack's future, for the right to lead differently than the generations before him. They tore at each other with savage fury, blood spattering the ground. Victor's teeth found Dominic's shoulder, ripping deep. Dominic's claws opened Victor's side, exposing ribs. They broke apart, circled, attacked again. Around them, the battle was ending. Alliance wolves had overwhelmed the Blood Moon forces. Some surrendered, others fled. But the outcome was clear: Victor's assault had failed, which made him more dangerous. A cornered wolf with nothing left to lose. Victor feinted left, then drove right, his jaws aimed for Dominic's throat. It was a killing strike, executed with precision born from decades of combat. But Dominic had anticipated it. He'd studied Victor's patterns, learned from every encounter, prepared for exactly this moment. He twisted away from the strike, using Victor's momentum against him. His jaws closed around Victor's neck. Not the killing bite, not yet. A hold that could end in death or mercy, depending on what Victor chose next. Submit or die. The ancient law of pack challenges. Victor struggled, but Dominic's grip was unbreakable. Around them, the battle had stopped completely. Every wolf, Blood Moon and Alliance alike, watched to see how this would end. Dominic felt Victor's pulse hammering against his teeth. One bite, One application of pressure, and it would be over. Victor Strand would be dead, Blood Moon Pack would be leaderless, and this threat would be eliminated permanently. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Leadership isn't just about knowing when to fight. It's about knowing when mercy is stronger than violence. Dominic released Victor's throat. He shifted back to human form, standing over Victor's wolf with absolute dominance, but also absolute restraint. "I could kill you," Dominic said clearly, his voice carrying to every watching wolf. "By pack law, by right of combat, by every tradition you claim to honor, I could end you right now." Victor shifted back as well, his hand going to his bleeding neck, his eyes wide with shock. "But my mother taught me that strength isn't about domination. It's about wisdom, about knowing when breaking the cycle of violence serves everyone better than perpetuating it." Dominic looked around at the assembled wolves, his pack, his alliance, even the defeated Blood Moon fighters. "Victor Strand, you are beaten. Your assault failed. Your wolves are surrendered or fled. You have lost." Dominic's voice rang with authority. "I could kill you, or I could offer you something different. A chance to end this old hatred. To build something new from the ashes of old grudges. What are you proposing?" Victor's voice was hoarse, disbelieving. "Conditional surrender. You step down as Blood Moon Alpha. Your pack chooses new leadership, someone not poisoned by 40 years of resentment. In exchange, Blood Moon territory is protected, your pack members are safe, and we rebuild the alliance that should have existed all along." Stunned silence filled the clearing. "You're offering me mercy?" Victor sounded almost offended. "I'm offering everyone a future." Dominic looked at the Blood Moon wolves who'd surrendered. "Your pack members don't deserve to suffer because you made bad choices. They don't deserve to lose their territory because you couldn't let go of old hatred. So yes, I'm offering mercy. Not for you, but for them." One of the Blood Moon wolves, a younger male, maybe 30, shifted to human form and stepped forward. "I'm Aaron Strand, Victor's nephew and second in command." He looked at his uncle with something like pity. "He's right, uncle. This needs to end. You've led us to ruin chasing a 40-year-old grudge. It's time to let someone else lead." Other Blood Moon wolves murmured agreement. Victor looked around at his own pack, seeing the truth in their eyes. They were done following him down this path. "You're taking my pack," Victor said flatly. "Your pack is choosing their own future," Dominic corrected, "as they should have been allowed to do all along. That's what real leadership looks like, Victor. Not forcing obedience through fear, but earning respect through wisdom." He extended his hand, not in friendship, but in acknowledgement of surrender. Victor stared at that hand for a long moment. Pride warred with pragmatism. Rage battled with resignation. Finally, slowly, he took it. "I yield," Victor said, the words clearly costing him. "Blood Moon Pack surrenders to the Northern Alliance." Dominic felt the weight of victory settle over him. Not triumphant, but grave. He'd won. The threat was ended. His pack was safe. But he'd also just fundamentally changed the power dynamics of the Northern Territories. Blood Moon Pack would need to be rebuilt, integrated into the alliance structure, taught new ways of operating. It would be complicated, messy, imperfect, but it would be better than endless cycles of violence and hatred. "Get medical attention for your wolves," Dominic told Aaron Strand. "Alliance healers will treat Blood Moon injured the same as our own. Then we'll talk about transition of leadership and alliance integration." "Thank you, Alpha Blackthorn." Aaron's voice was sincere, grateful. "You didn't have to show mercy. My mother believed in mercy as strength. About time someone proved her right." Dominic turned to find Cassandra Reeves in human form, wrapped in an emergency blanket and grinning fiercely. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen," she said. "But damn if it wasn't effective. You just solved the Victor problem without creating a power vacuum war. Let's hope it stays solved." Dominic looked around at the aftermath. Injured wolves being treated, fires being extinguished, his manor still standing despite the assault. "How bad are our casualties?" 7 seriously injured, none critical. "We were lucky. If you'd arrived 10 minutes later, it would have been much worse." Cassandra's expression turned serious. "But you did arrive. The alliance came through. That's going to resonate across the territorial networks. Good. Maybe it'll discourage others from trying similar tactics." Dominic grabbed clothes someone offered, dressing quickly. His shoulder throbbed where Victor had bitten him, but it was already healing. "I need to check on Sarah. Then we'll start damage assessment and coordinate with the other alphas." He found her in the command center, safe and whole, working with Elena to coordinate medical response. She looked up when he entered, and the relief that crossed her face made something tight in his chest unclench. "You're okay," she breathed, crossing to him and running her hands over his arms, his chest, checking for injuries despite the blood that covered him. "I'm fine." Victor surrendered. "It's over." He pulled her close, needing to feel her solid and real in his arms. "It's finally over." She hugged him tight, then pulled back to look at him. "I heard what you did. Offering mercy instead of execution. Your mother would be so proud." "I hope so." Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I keep thinking about what she wrote in those letters. About breaking cycles. About building something better. Killing Victor would have been the traditional response. But traditional hasn't been serving us well. You're creating a new tradition. One based on wisdom and partnership instead of domination and fear." Sarah smiled. "That's revolutionary, Dominic." "It's terrifying," he corrected. "But also right. I know it's right." They stood together in the command center while the pack worked around them, and Dominic felt the weight of leadership shift slightly. Not lighter, it would never be light, but different. Shared. He wasn't carrying this alone anymore. He had Sarah, had his alliance, had a vision for the future that honored his mother's memory while creating something new. It was enough. It was everything. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. The council sent representatives to assess the aftermath of Victor's assault, and their report was damning. Blood Moon Pack had violated the cease and desist order with premeditated, coordinated aggression using military-grade equipment. Victor Strand was formally stripped of alpha status and placed under council supervision pending criminal proceedings. Aaron Strand was confirmed as Blood Moon's new alpha after a pack vote that was surprisingly unanimous. His first act was to formally petition for inclusion in the Northern Alliance Pact, which the member alphas approved after careful deliberation. 8 packs, united under principles of mutual defense and shared leadership. It was the largest territorial alliance in North American shifter history. The council wasn't happy about the development, but they couldn't deny the legal validity or the demonstrated effectiveness. Helena Vasquez personally called Dominic to offer grudging respect. "You've changed the game, Alpha Blackthorn. For better or worse remains to be seen. But you've definitely changed it. That was always the goal, Council Chair. My mother wanted change. I'm just finally delivering it. She'd be proud." "Hell, I'm proud, and I barely knew her." Helena paused. "The Council's going to be watching your alliance closely. There are members who see this as a threat to central authority. Then they should see it as an opportunity instead. We're proving that strong regional alliances don't weaken the Council. They strengthen the overall pack structure by creating stability and cooperation." Dominic kept his voice reasonable. "But if the Council insists on seeing partnership as threat, that says more about their insecurity than our intentions." Helena laughed. "You're going to be a thorn in our side for years, aren't you? I prefer to think of myself as a catalyst for positive change. But sure, thorn works too." After that call ended, Dominic found himself back in the archives with Sarah, who was putting the final touches on Elizabeth's manuscript. "It's ready," she announced, turning her laptop so he could see. "Letters from an Alpha's mate, Elizabeth Blackthorn's vision for pack leadership. 300 pages of revolutionary ideas, passionate arguments, and a mother's dream for her son's future." Dominic read the introduction Sarah had written, his throat tightening with emotion. "It's perfect. When can we publish?" "I've been in contact with the Shifter Historical Society. They want to do a special edition with commentary from current alphas about how the Luna Protocol concepts could be implemented today." Sarah's smile was radiant. "Your mother's voice is about to reach thousands of packs, Dominic. She's going to change the world, even 40 years later. Because of you." He pulled her into his lap, kissing her softly. "You made this possible. You saw value in dusty old letters and turned them into a movement. I just preserved them. You lived them. You proved partnership works by choosing me as your equal instead of your subordinate." She cupped his face in her hands. "We did this together, just like she wanted." A knock at the door interrupted them. Marcus stuck his head in, grinning. "Sorry to interrupt the romantic moment, but the Pack Council is assembled for tonight's meeting. And Sarah, they want you there. Officially." "Officially?" Sarah looked between them, confused. "The council voted," Dominic explained, standing with her still in his arms. "They want to formalize your role as pack historian and chief advisor. You'd be the first non-shifter to hold an official council position in Blackthorn history. Sarah's eyes widened. They want me on the council? They want you as Luna, Marcus corrected, using the old term for an alpha's mate in a position of shared authority. Full partnership, equal voice, formal recognition of your role in pack leadership. That's the Luna protocol. You're actually implementing it. Sarah looked at Dominic with wonder. We're implementing it. Together. If you're willing. Dominic set her down, suddenly nervous in a way he rarely felt. I know you signed on for 3 months of archive work, not a lifetime of pack politics and shifter drama. But Sarah, I want you here. Not just as my mate, but as my partner in every sense. My Luna. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intent. The proposal comes later, with a proper ring and a romantic setting and everything you deserve. He smiled. But yes. Eventually, emphatically yes. If you'll have me. If I'll have you? Sarah laughed, tears streaming down her face. You stubborn alpha. I walked away from everything familiar to take a historian job in the middle of Montana. I fell in love with a man who made me want to throttle him and kiss him in equal measure. I fought beside your pack, stood up to council investigators, and helped you honor your mother's memory. Of course I'll have you. Of course I want to be your Luna. There's nothing else I'd rather be. Dominic kissed her properly then, pouring 10 years of loneliness and 3 months of discovery and a lifetime of future possibilities into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, Marcus was grinning like an idiot. So that's a yes to the council position? That's a yes to everything, Sarah confirmed, laughing. Now let's go make history. Again. The pack council meeting that night was unlike any in Blackthorn history. Sarah sat at the council table, not as a visitor but as an equal, her nameplate reading Luna Sarah Montague Blackthorn, even though they hadn't officially mated yet. The pack was getting ahead of itself, but Dominic didn't mind. Let them see the future he was building. Let them understand that partnership and shared authority weren't weaknesses but strengths. We need to discuss integration protocols for Blood Moon Pack members who want to relocate to Alliance territories, Elena was saying, going through the agenda. Some of them are asking for transfers away from the memories of Victor's leadership. We accommodate them, Dominic said immediately. Every Alliance pack commits to accepting transfers with full rights and protections. We prove that this alliance is about creating opportunities, not just military defense. Agreed, Sarah added, making notes. We should also establish an alliance-wide educational program. Share best practices, coordinate training, make sure all member packs have access to the same resources and knowledge. The council members nodded approval, and the discussion continued for another 2 hours. Policy decisions, resource allocation, diplomatic protocols. All the mundane but essential work of building something that would last. By the time the meeting ended, Dominic was exhausted but satisfied. They were doing it, actually building the vision his mother had fought for. He found Sarah on the back steps where they'd shared their first kiss, looking up at the stars with a contented expression. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, settling beside her. I'm thinking about how much has changed in 3 months. How I came here expecting to spend a quiet summer cataloging old documents, and instead I helped revolutionize pack governance, fell in love with an alpha, and became part of something bigger than myself. She leaned against his shoulder. It's been quite a ride. It's not over. This is just the beginning. Dominic wrapped an arm around her. We still have to implement the Luna protocol across 8 packs. Publish my mother's letters. Navigate council politics. Build lasting peace. Raise a family. He stopped, suddenly uncertain. Unless you don't want children. We never discussed that. I want everything, Sarah said simply. Children, family, partnership, purpose. All of it with you. Even though you'll age and I won't. Even though shifter lifespans are longer, and that's going to get complicated. We'll figure it out. Together. Just like we figure out everything else. She turned to face him fully. Dominic, I'm not scared of the complications. I'm excited by the possibilities. We're creating something new, not just in pack governance, but in what partnership means. Let's write our own rules instead of being limited by traditional expectations. He loved her so much in that moment it physically hurt. When this settles down, when we've got the alliance running smoothly and the council off our backs, I'm taking you somewhere beautiful and asking you properly. I'll be waiting. She kissed him softly. But Dominic, I don't need beautiful destinations or perfect moments. I just need you, asking from the heart. Then marry me. The words tumbled out without planning. Not someday, not eventually. Now. Marry me, be my Luna, my partner, my everything. Build this future with me. I know it's soon and rushed and probably crazy, but Sarah, I don't want to wait. Life's too short and too precious to waste time being cautious. Her smile was radiant in the starlight. Yes, absolutely yes. They kissed under the Montana stars. Two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something revolutionary from archives and arguments and absolute trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The alliance would face tests. The council would cause problems. Life would be complicated and messy and imperfect. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. Perfect partnership. Equal footing. Love that challenged and supported in equal measure. Elizabeth Blackthorne's dream, finally realized in her son and his fierce, brilliant human mate. The Luna Protocol brought to life. 2 years later. The spring morning was perfect. Warm sun, clear sky, and the kind of gentle breeze that made the Montana wilderness feel like a cathedral. Hundreds of chairs were arranged in the manor's east gardens, where Elizabeth Blackthorne's roses bloomed in wild profusion, creating a riot of color and fragrance. Dominic stood at the makeshift altar under an arbor woven with wildflowers, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their slight tremor. Marcus stood beside him, grinning like the insufferable best man he was. Nervous? His beta asked quietly. Terrified, Dominic admitted. What if she changes her mind? What if she realizes she could have a normal human life instead of all this complexity? Then you'd be the dumbest alpha in history for doubting Sarah Montague Blackthorne. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. She's not going anywhere, Dom. She chose this. Chose you. Chose all of us. 2 years of living it hasn't changed her mind. Why would today? Because today was different. Today wasn't just about their private commitment, which they'd honored since that night under the stars 2 years ago. Today was the formal mating ceremony, conducted in front of every pack member, with representatives from all 8 Alliance packs in attendance, and even a delegation from the council observing. Today, they were making their partnership official in every way that mattered to shifter society. The string quartet began playing, and everyone stood. Dominic's breath caught. Sarah walked down the garden path on Elena's arm. She'd chosen the pack healer rather than asking a father who couldn't be there. She wore a dress the color of aged whiskey, the exact shade of her eyes, with wildflowers woven into her honey blonde hair. She was radiant, confident, and looking at him like he was the only person in the world who mattered. When she reached the altar, Elena placed Sarah's hand in Dominic's with a warm smile and a whispered, "Take care of each other." "Always," they said in unison, making Elena laugh. The ceremony was conducted by Helena Vasquez herself, the council chair having requested the honor after watching Dominic and Sarah revolutionize pack governance over the last 2 years. She stood before them now, her weathered face warm with genuine affection. "We gather today to witness something rare and precious," Helena began, her voice carrying to every corner of the garden. "The formal claiming of mates who are also partners, who lead together, decide together, and build the future together." She turned to Dominic. "Alpha Blackthorne, you were raised in tradition, taught that leadership meant standing alone. Yet you've proven that the strongest leadership is shared. Do you claim Sarah Montague as your mate, your Luna, your equal partner in all things?" "I do." Dominic's voice was steady now, certain. "She challenges me, supports me, and makes me better than I could ever be alone. I claim her as my mate and my partner, from this day forward, in all ways that matter." Helena turned to Sarah. "Sarah Montague, you walked into a world not your own and transformed it through courage and wisdom. Do you claim Dominic Blackthorne as your mate, your alpha, your equal partner in all things?" "I do." Sarah's smile was radiant. "He's stubborn, overprotective, and occasionally infuriating. He's also honorable, brave, and wholly devoted to the people he loves. I claim him as my mate and my partner, from this day forward, for as long as we both shall live. Then by the authority vested in me by the Continental Pack Council, and in accordance with Pack law and tradition, I recognize this mating bond as valid and binding." Helena pulled out a leather cord threaded with silver and amber stones. "This cord represents partnership, 2 lives woven together, distinct but inseparable." She tied it around their joined hands, the old symbolism given new meaning. What has been joined by choice cannot be separated by circumstance. What has been claimed by love cannot be broken by challenge. You are mated, partnered, and united. Helena's smile widened. You may seal your bond. Dominic pulled Sarah close and kissed her as the assembled packs erupted in cheers. His wolf rose to the surface, recognizing mate on every level, and he felt Sarah's answering certainty in the way she kissed him back, fierce and claiming and absolutely sure. When they finally broke apart, Sarah was laughing and crying at the same time. We did it, she whispered. We're really doing this. We've been doing this for 2 years, Dominic reminded her, brushing away her tears. Today just makes it official. Official matters. She kissed him again, quick and joyful. Now let's go celebrate with our pack. Our packs, plural. Our ridiculously large, complicated, revolutionary family. The reception was held in the Great Hall, which had been transformed into a celebration space that somehow managed to feel both elegant and wild. 8-pack banners hung from the ceiling: Blackthorn, Blood Moon, Silver Lake, Cascade, Granite Peak, Wind River, Iron Ridge, and Mountain Crest, representing the alliance that had held strong for 2 years and showed no signs of fracturing. Dominic and Sarah moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes from what felt like hundreds of pack members. The integration of Blood Moon into the alliance had been rocky at first, but Aaron Strand had proven himself a capable, progressive leader who shared their vision for the future. Alpha Luna. Aaron approached with his own mate, a fierce woman named Diana who'd been instrumental in Blood Moon's cultural transformation. Congratulations. And thank you. For what? Sarah asked, though Dominic suspected she knew. For giving us a second chance. For proving that packs can change, can evolve, can become better versions of themselves. Aaron's expression was sincere. 2 years ago, we were on a path to destruction. Now we're part of something revolutionary. That's because you had the courage to offer mercy instead of vengeance. Partnership requires forgiveness, Dominic said simply. Holding on to old grudges would have defeated the whole purpose. They talked for a few more minutes before other well-wishers pulled them away. Cassandra Reeves was holding court near the bar, regaling younger pack members with exaggerated stories of the tribunal. Juliana Torres was dancing with her own mate, their joy infectious. David Foster and Robert Chin were deep in discussion about the Alliance's economic development initiatives. It was exactly what Elizabeth Blackthorne had envisioned. Packs working together, supporting each other, building something stronger than any could create alone. Speech time, Marcus announced, tapping his glass to get everyone's attention. The happy couple has words of wisdom to share. Or at least Sarah does. Dominic will probably just growl Alpha Y things. The crowd laughed, and Dominic shot his beta a mock glare before standing with Sarah. Thank you all for being here, Sarah began, her voice clear and warm. 2 years ago, I came to Blackthorn territory as a stranger, an outsider, someone who didn't belong in your world. You could have rejected me, resented me, made my work impossible. Instead, you welcomed me, challenged me, taught me, made me family. She paused, her eyes bright. The Luna Protocol that Elizabeth Blackthorne fought for wasn't just about alphas and their mates. It was about recognizing that strength comes from diversity, wisdom from different perspectives, and progress from willingness to question tradition. You've all proven that vision right. Every single one of you, by choosing to be part of something new. Dominic took her hand, adding his own words. My mother died thinking she'd failed, that her work meant nothing, that tradition would always win over progress. But she was wrong. She didn't fail, she planted seeds that took 40 years to bloom. And now, thanks to all of you, those seeds are growing into something beautiful and strong. He looked around at the assembled packs, at faces both familiar and new, at the children playing in the corners who would grow up knowing partnership as normal rather than revolutionary. Elizabeth's letters have been published and distributed to over 300 packs across North America. 57 packs have adopted some version of the Luna Protocol in their governance structures. The Council has formed a committee to study alliance-based territorial management. And most importantly, you're all here, living proof that a different way works. To Elizabeth Blackthorne, Cassandra Reeves called out, raising her glass, whose vision finally found the right alphas to bring it to life. To Elizabeth, the response was thunderous, voices blending in tribute to a woman most had never met, but whose impact they all felt. Dominic felt his throat tighten with emotion. His mother would have loved this, would have been so proud of what they'd built from the ashes of her broken dreams. And to Sarah, he added, his voice thick. who saw value in dusty letters and ancient grievances, who believed partnership was possible when everyone said it wasn't, and who became my Luna not through submission, but through absolute equals standing together. To Sarah, the crowd echoed. She blushed and hid her face against Dominic's shoulder, overwhelmed by the affection and respect radiating from every corner of the room. The party continued late into the night, but eventually Dominic and Sarah slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand through the gardens toward their private quarters. Tired? Dominic asked. Exhausted. Happy. Complete. She leaned against him. How did we get here, Dominic? From you glaring at me in your office to this? You refused to submit. I finally learned to stop demanding it. He pulled her close, breathing in her wildflower scent that had become as familiar as his own. Best thing that ever happened to me, your stubbornness. Right back at you. She tilted her face up, and he kissed her softly, slowly, tasting joy and promise and future. When they reached their quarters, Sarah paused at the door. There's something I need to tell you. Dominic's wolf perked up at her tone, nervous but excited. What? I'm pregnant. The world stopped, then restarted with brilliant, overwhelming joy. We're. Dominic couldn't form complete sentences. Really? About 8 weeks along. Elena confirmed it this morning. Sarah's smile was radiant and terrified. I know we talked about waiting, and the timing isn't perfect with all the alliance work, but... He kissed her, cutting off the anxious explanation. The timing is perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. Even though I'm human? Even though we don't know how shifter genetics will affect a half-human child. Even though. Especially though. Dominic placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. Our child, human, shifter, or something entirely new, doesn't matter. They'll be loved, protected, and taught that partnership and equality are normal. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. You're going to be an amazing father. We're going to be amazing parents, he corrected. Together, like everything else. They stood in the doorway, holding each other as stars wheeled overhead, and the sounds of celebration echoed from the great hall. Inside their quarters, Elizabeth Blackthorne's letters sat on the desk, now published and changing pack culture across the continent. Outside, 8 packs slept safely under the protection of an alliance built on mutual respect and shared vision. And between them, in Sarah's womb, a new life grew, the next generation of their revolutionary family. What do you think your mother would say? Sarah asked softly. About all of this? Dominic thought about the woman who'd fought so hard for change, who'd died thinking she'd failed, whose words and vision had finally found fertile ground. I think she'd say it's about damn time, he said with a smile, and that she's proud of us. All of us. I wish I could have met her. You carry her legacy every day. You are what she dreamed of, a Luna who leads with wisdom and courage, who makes the alpha better through partnership rather than submission. Dominic kissed Sarah's forehead. She lives through you, through us, through the future we're building. They went inside, closing the door on the celebration and the world beyond. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. A pregnancy to navigate, an alliance to strengthen, a council to keep satisfied, and a child to prepare for. But tonight, they were just Dominic and Sarah. Mates, partners, equals. Building a life and a legacy that honored the past while creating something entirely new. Elizabeth Blackthorne's dream, realized at last. The Luna Protocol, alive and thriving in her son's fierce, brilliant, revolutionary mate. And a future where alphas didn't stand alone, but shared power with partners strong enough to challenge them, wise enough to guide them, and brave enough to change the world beside them. It was everything. It was enough. It was just the beginning. The end.